Sometimes the future whispers louder than the present ever could. The air tasted metallic, a sharp tang under the low hum of neon lights stretching down empty streets. He stood at the edge of the skyline, eyes tracing the skeletons of towers half lit, half decayed. Somewhere far below, a distant siren rolled like a slow drumbeat, teasing urgency he couldn't place. "This isn't what I imagined," he muttered to no one. The words nearly lost to the city's sighs. Rain began, fat drops drumming against his coat, tracing invisible lines across the fabric, each one whispering a different warning. He remembered a tweet, a casual prophecy he had read hours ago, half dismissed, now echoing in the pit of his chest. America might fracture faster than we can patch it. The thought made his jaw tighten, his breath visible, trembling in the cold mist. Somewhere, a metallic clang, an empty construction scaffold, swaying, punctuated the tension. And for a fraction of a second, he swore he heard the faintest voice whisper, "You can't stop what's coming." In the alley below, neon reflections shimmered over puddles, fragmented like shards of memory he didn't want to confront. Footsteps echoed against brick and steel, not his own, cautious but deliberate. He froze. A trash can tipped over somewhere, spilling rusted cans into the water, each strike sounding a little too precise, a little too planned. His mind raced. If the economic currents turned the way Musk had predicted, the social cracks would widen, and people would no longer move in rhythm. They would stumble, collide, vanish into chaos. A soft mechanical whir accompanied the movement in the shadows. Something was watching, always watching, yet human in its curiosity. He remembered the last board meeting. Talk of AI-driven logistics, satellite grids, self-driving networks. If the systems fail, Musk had said with that unnerving calm, we won't know it until the lights go out. Now, in the dripping darkness, he understood exactly what he meant. He moved, carefully, letting the wet asphalt pull his steps into a slow rhythm, the city's heartbeat syncing with his own. In the distance, the golden glow of a factory furnace painted the clouds in rusty streaks. Smoke trailed upward, like a thin warning finger. He caught a faint metallic taste in the air, magnetism, wires, and electricity overripe. The thought struck him suddenly. What if innovation itself becomes the enemy? Somewhere high above, a drone buzzed, subtle yet insistent, almost polite, surveying streets like a patient predator. Its lights flickered across broken windows, bouncing across his shadow. He ducked instinctively, realizing even the skyline's giants couldn't shield him from the new surveillance machines that measured human hesitation, fear, indecision. Footsteps shifted behind him, soft, almost hesitant. He didn't turn. He didn't need to. He could feel the presence before it arrived. His pulse picked up. The memory of a boardroom conversation resurfaced. In 5 years, American cities might look familiar, but feel alien. Every word now seemed prophetic, every tone a warning embedded in casual futurism. Lightning cracked over the skyline, illuminating skeletal towers in stark, white relief. For a heartbeat, the world held still, the storm silent but tense, and in that silence he felt it, the pulse of inevitability, a rhythm Americans didn't yet hear, but one he knew would crescendo in months, then weeks, then days. Rain intensified, clattering off metal railings, gutter lids, the frozen fragments of advertisements plastered on walls. He moved toward the glow of the bridge, each step measured, as if testing whether the ground itself would betray him. Something in the distance, a flicker of motion, a shadow breaking the neon glow made him pause. The world seemed to inhale around him, a collective hush that carried secrets of ambition, collapse, and renewal, all at once. He whispered under his breath, "This is what no one predicts." The words dissolved in the rain, carried away into the undercurrent of mechanical hums, distant sirens, and the soft, almost human, hiss of pneumatic valves in empty factories. A crow called somewhere, hollow and deliberate, punctuating the night like a question that demanded an answer he didn't have. The street narrowed. Graffiti and torn posters hinted at revolts. No one would read. Dreams forgotten in alleyways where fluorescent light struggled against shadow. He felt the city's pulse uneasy, restless, electric. The thought hit him suddenly. If America changes this fast, people won't recognize it until it's too late. Footsteps quickened behind him, a soft click metal against concrete. He glanced briefly at a flickering reflection in a puddle. Nothing. Yet, the air vibrated with presence. Breathing shallow, he imagined networks failing, satellites flickering, and automated systems turning against their creators. Musk's predictions weren't just warnings, they were invitations to witness inevitability. He reached the bridge, staring down at water black as obsidian, thinking about the fragility of civilization when every system depended on a pulse, a signal, a wire. Somewhere in the undercurrent, a motor thrummed, like an unseen predator circling its prey. He thought about power grids, societal tension, the thin threads of law and trust holding cities together. One wrong flicker, and the entire choreography could unravel. Thunder rolled again, longer this time, echoing from one side of the river to the other. He felt it in his chest, in the slight catch of his breath, in the electric taste on his tongue. The thought persisted. We're closer than anyone realizes. A drone whirred above, scanning, plotting, indifferent to human fear, and he sensed Musk's vision taking physical form. America reshaped by technology, ambition, and unpredictability. A faint light flickered at the end of the bridge, reflecting on the slick metal like a signal. He didn't move toward it, he waited, letting the hum of machinery, the drip of rain, the distant, hollow wail of sirens, and the faint shuffle behind him tell a story of what might come. It was a story of friction, of systems tipping into chaos, of human instinct colliding with artificial foresight. Then, a single word whispered, carried on the wind, soon. He didn't flinch. He only exhaled, letting the storm wrap him, letting neon shadows play across his face, and felt the truth of it. What Elon Musk predicted wasn't just potential. It was a rhythm the country could feel if it only listened. And somewhere deep in the city's veins, the pulse quickened, faster than before, a reminder that in the next 5 years, nothing would be the same. Some warnings arrive as whispers, some arrive as storms. The city smelled of wet asphalt and ozone, a pulse in the air that made his skin prickle. Neon reflected off puddles like fractured glass, casting colors that didn't exist in daylight: acid green, rust orange, electric violet. Somewhere behind him, the faint hiss of hydraulics cut through the night, measured and deliberate, like a predator calculating. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. He could feel the eyes before he saw the shapes. The bridge ended abruptly, leading into a street narrowed by scaffolds and barricades. The sound of water dripping from rusty gutters became a rhythm, punctuated by the soft clatter of a falling sign swinging in the wind. "It's happening faster than they admit," he murmured, and the words carried into the fog, swallowed by neon haze. Somewhere far off, a generator whined, vibrating in time with the city's heartbeat. A figure emerged from the shadows, only half formed in the flicker of faulty streetlights. Movement was subtle, but deliberate. Every shift, every breath calculated. The metallic taste of tension coated his tongue. His pulse caught. He remembered Musk's words from a video interview. Automation will outpace governance, and people will panic without realizing why. This was the proof, the subtle, creeping first wave. The figure stepped closer, boots wet, dragging something heavy. Rain drummed against the surface of a nearby car hood, and in that moment he saw the glint. Wires tangled with shards of reflective metal. It wasn't just a person, it was a warning, a signal of what infrastructure and ambition combined could yield when unchecked. Thunder rolled above, but it was a distant echo compared to the drumbeat in his chest. The city seemed to bend around him, walls leaning slightly, reflections skewed, streetlights blinking at irregular intervals. Everything felt alive, as if the asphalt itself remembered the predictions Musk had whispered into the world and had begun to tremble with anticipation. The figure spoke, but it wasn't a voice that traveled, it was more vibration than sound. "You shouldn't be here," it said, words slicing through the rain, then vanishing before they reached the edges of comprehension. He didn't respond. Instead, he let his eyes trace the environment: a street corner with shattered glass, a tipped-over scooter, wires dangling from a cracked electrical box. Each detail felt deliberate, a micro-arc of chaos. Somewhere above, a drone hummed, monitoring, analyzing, calculating. Its lights flickered in sync with the figure's movements, creating a pattern that was almost human but not quite. He realized that the city had become a choreography of the unseen, each movement dictated by systems and people who barely knew they were participating. A sudden metallic click, a lock disengaging. From an adjacent alley, a pile of crates toppled, scattering onto the wet pavement. The sound was sharp, precise, almost surgical. He tensed, instinctive, and in the reflection of a puddle, he saw movement shapes converging, shadows leaning toward the sound. Panic wanted to rise, but he pushed it down. Observation was better than reaction. The world moved faster than fear. The figure raised an arm, revealing a device half cased in steel and wires. Sparks danced, small but deliberate, each pop resonating like a heartbeat. He recognized it instantly, an improvised signal jammer. If activated, it could cripple the localized grid, turn lights into darkness, communication into static. Musk's predictions weren't theory here, they were protocol, unfolding in real time. He inched forward, careful, listening. Rain pattered harder, drowning subtle shifts in the environment. A soft hiss behind him, an air vent releasing pressure, made him flinch. He felt the presence again, everywhere and nowhere, like the city itself was watching. His chest tightened. The thought he hadn't voiced yet clawed at him. Infrastructure and ambition are enemies when no one notices the intersection. The figure lowered the device. In that microsecond, the city held its breath. He saw it clearly. The chaos wasn't loud yet. It was subtle, methodical, creeping into the veins of daily life. A bus passed, silent, but its lights flickered in irregular rhythm, momentary static disrupting signals. People on the sidewalk, oblivious, pulled jackets tighter, adjusted umbrellas, never realizing the patterns shifting beneath their feet. A siren somewhere, distant but urgent, pierced the neon night. He felt it in his chest, synchronous with his heartbeat. A reminder that America's systems had memory, history, infrastructure, and ambition layered over each other like sedimentary rock, waiting to fracture. The figure stepped aside, almost polite, letting him pass. And, in that moment, he glimpsed the city's pulse, fragile yet relentless, waiting to see how humans and machines would collide. A low wind rose, carrying rain in sideways streaks that licked the walls. He paused on a corner, catching his reflection in a shattered shop window. The image was fractured, multiplied faces overlapping, lights bleeding across skin and clothing. He whispered, almost to himself, "We'll adapt, or we'll break." The words disappeared into the wet air, leaving only the subtle hum of electricity and the mechanical rhythm of unseen observers. A distant explosion, small, contained, but unmistakable, shook the street. Windows rattled. A pigeon launched from a nearby ledge, wings catching neon in iridescent arcs. The figure had vanished, leaving only the evidence of their work. He took a slow breath, letting it fill the hollow spaces where anticipation and dread lived. Musk's predictions were no longer speculation, they were audible, visible, tangible in the minutiae of urban life. The wind shifted, carrying with it a smell of ozone and burning metal. He followed it instinctively, knowing that the first wave had passed, and the city was left trembling in its wake. The rhythm of infrastructure, society, and ambition had shifted. Footsteps behind him, human machine, indistinguishable, echoed in counterpoint. Every sound became a motif, a harbinger, a signature of the change unfolding. He paused beneath a flickering streetlight. Rain ran down his face, mixing with the sweat he hadn't noticed. The thought emerged, sharp and unbidden. We're living in the shadow of predictions now, but no one realizes it yet. Somewhere in the distance, a generator coughed, a transformer groaned, and the city whispered, quietly, ominously, "Soon, everything changes." Lightning flashed again, more violently this time, and the reflection in the puddles multiplied, fracturing his vision. Neon and shadow danced across the surfaces, revealing details only visible for heartbeats. The city had begun writing its own story, one Musk had predicted, but no one would admit aloud. Footsteps quickened behind him again, closer, patient, curious, and he realized the city wasn't waiting for consent. It was moving, unstoppable, a living entity guided by systems, ambition, and inevitability. He exhaled slowly, letting the tension settle, only to realize it had intensified. Somewhere nearby, mechanical clicks punctuated the rainfall, unseen yet present, echoing the rhythm Musk had described. Society teetering on the edge, technology nudging forward, humans struggling to keep pace. The rain fell harder, louder, masking subtle signals, yet he caught them all, the whispers, the hums, the clicks, and let them sink into his awareness. A crow called, distant, yet deliberate, its hollow note slicing through the storm. The thought struck him suddenly. The next 5 years won't be measured in headlines, they'll be measured in quiet collapses, unnoticed shifts, and the slow reconfiguration of everything we take for granted. The city breathed around him, alive, predatory, and patient. He continued down the alley, wet asphalt gleaming beneath his feet, neon reflections dancing, and he knew this was only the beginning. Somewhere, almost imperceptibly, a soft voice whispered from the shadows, "Soon." And he listened, heart steadying, mind racing, because in the coming days, weeks, and months, America would feel the rhythm of change, whether it was ready or not. Chaos doesn't announce itself, it sneaks, one quiet fracture at a time. The sky had turned a bruised purple, clouds crawling like slow predators over the horizon. Rain fell in sheets now, drumming a relentless rhythm against corrugated metal roofs, slick pavement, and broken neon signs. He walked through streets that were beginning to look alien, familiar structures fractured by shadows and reflection. The hum of generators and distant sirens wove together into a single pulse, America's heartbeat, irregular and untrustworthy. A streetlight flickered violently and died, leaving the alley in near darkness. A faint metallic hiss followed, then silence. For a moment, the city held its breath, waiting. Then, somewhere to the left, a transformer groaned and exploded, sending sparks like miniature fireworks into the rain. Windows shuddered, puddles jumped, neon reflections fractured further. People screamed somewhere, their voices swallowed almost instantly by the storm. He ducked under a hanging sign, eyes scanning. The world had shifted subtly but irrevocably. Systems were faltering, not catastrophically yet, but in ways no one would notice until they collided. Traffic lights blinked erratically, drones swerved, and automated delivery bots froze mid-step, their mechanical hearts stuttering. Musk's words echoed in his mind. If you aren't paying attention, the infrastructure will collapse first, quietly, invisibly, like a virus. Footsteps approached from behind. Not hurried, not panicked, but deliberate, precise. He pivoted slightly, catching a figure in a black coat, disappearing into the fog. Something about the motion was calculated, mechanical almost. He followed, knowing instinctively this was no random passerby. Around the corner, he found a small plaza, fountains broken and silent, benches overturned. Neon signs flickered erratically, reflecting in puddles like fractured memories. People clustered here, confused, their movements hesitant and jagged, like puppets whose strings had been tugged too suddenly. Someone tried to call a friend. The phone emitted nothing but static. Another held a tablet that glitched mid-swipe, screen frozen, on a cracked interface. The systems were failing, layer by layer. A faint whirring overhead drew his gaze. Drones hovered, scanning, adjusting, recording. They were everywhere now, almost invisible. Yet he could sense the motifs of surveillance embedded in the environment. He realized that Musk's vision of a controlled, automated world was no longer a prediction. It was beginning, quietly, like a rising tide. The metallic click came again. From the shadows, a figure stepped forward, a technician, maybe, or something else. They moved fluidly, pressing buttons on a device wired with exposed circuits. Sparks flew, each pop resonating like a heartbeat. The plaza's lights flickered and dimmed. Monitors displayed glitching images, fragments of maps, graphs, and data that no one could interpret. Panic rippled silently through the crowd. He stepped closer, trying to see the device. The crowd parted without realizing, as if guided by invisible choreography. Each movement, each hesitation, each glance seemed orchestrated by the emerging dysfunction. Musk's words returned. People will adapt to chaos, but the systems won't wait. A low rumble vibrated through the ground, the subway system below reacting to a failure somewhere beneath the city. Steam hissed from vents, and a distant metal screech suggested a rail car had derailed. The first visible breakdown of infrastructure was unfolding in real time. He inhaled sharply, a taste of ozone and wet concrete filling his mouth. Somewhere nearby, a siren wailed, a different one this time. Not automated, human-made. People froze mid-step, trying to locate the source. A small child cried, and the sound cut sharply through the mechanical hum, piercing the veil of electronic monotony. He felt it in his chest. Empathy, fear, and a spark of anticipation. The city was alive, reacting, testing humanity against the rising tide of automation. The figure in black moved again, pressing another sequence into the device. The drones responded instantly, lights flickering in irregular patterns, scanning faces, predicting movement. People scattered, slipping on wet asphalt, their fear amplifying the chaos. He watched, internalizing, analyzing every microbeat, knowing this was Musk's vision of the tipping point, quiet, sudden, precise. A bolt of lightning split the sky, illuminating a street corner where automated vehicles had stalled, bumping into one another like confused insects. Horns blared, but not in coordination, each sound a fragmented beat in the city's new rhythm. Someone shouted, words lost in the rain and mechanical hums. He felt it, the friction between humans and systems had become visible, audible, unavoidable. He moved toward the plaza center, avoiding scattered debris. Each puddle reflected distorted light, creating multiple realities in miniature, fractured and unstable. Someone had dropped a digital map. It flickered wildly, rendering streets as impossible mazes. People huddled, looking for guidance. But guidance was gone. The systems they relied on were failing in ways too small to notice until they compounded. A sudden metallic bang rang out. The figure in black vanished into the shadows, leaving the device smoking on the wet ground. Sparks fizzled and died. Screens flickered one last time, before fading to black. The plaza was silent for a heartbeat, then erupted into controlled chaos, shouts, footsteps, wet shoes skidding across slick stone. The micro-collapse Musk had envisioned was no longer theory. It was visible. He stood at the edge, watching, heart racing. The city's rhythm had changed, and he could feel it in every vibration of the ground, every echo of human confusion, every mechanical twitch in the drones above. Musk had predicted transformation, tension, and disruption, but seeing it unfold was sharper, more vivid, more terrifying than any simulation or forecast. Thunder rolled again, and he felt the weight of inevitability pressing down. The city was reshaping itself in real time, systems failing and reconfiguring. Humans adapting too slowly to notice, machines moving faster than comprehension allowed. Neon reflections danced across rain-slick surfaces, fractured images multiplying endlessly. He whispered to himself, almost philosophically, the future isn't coming, it's already here. And somewhere in the flickering distance, mechanical clicks, electrical hums, and sirens blended into one continuous motif. The city's pulse now audible to anyone attuned. Footsteps approached again, close, deliberate, and he felt the presence of unseen antagonists orchestrating chaos with precision. He didn't look, they were everywhere, impossible to separate from the storm, the neon, the fractured asphalt. The world had become a living system, teetering between collapse and adaptation, and Musk's predictions had found flesh and sound. Lightning illuminated the plaza one final time. In its stark glow, he saw reflections of humans, machines, and infrastructure colliding. Each micro-event, each subtle failure, each hesitation became a story in itself. A story of systems faltering, ambition accelerating, and the first visible consequences of the next 5 years manifesting in real time. The rain continued, relentless. He moved forward, cautious, knowing that this was only the beginning. The city was alive, breathing, calculating, testing humanity at every step. And somewhere in the shadows, a quiet, deliberate voice whispered, carried on the wind, soon, it will all change. When the cracks show, it's the quiet panic that spreads first. The streets were no longer recognizable. Neon reflections fractured in every puddle, multiplying the chaos into infinite shards. Smoke curled from a distant transformer, thick and acrid, blending with the rain in a gray-brown haze. The hum of malfunctioning machines merged with distant sirens and human cries into a discordant symphony, alive and unpredictable. He moved cautiously, each step slipping on wet asphalt. Footsteps echoed behind him, soft, deliberate, but when he turned, there was no one. The shadows had teeth, edges sharp with movement that could not be fully understood. Somewhere, a drone buzzed above, tracking, calculating, silent yet invasive. Its lights flickered in a rhythm that was almost human, almost sentient. A small crowd had gathered near a collapsed billboard. People pushed and shoved, trying to retrieve phones, wallets, anything with a signal. A man shouted, words lost in the storm, while a child clung to his coat, sobbing. Systems were failing in ways too small to notice at first, but compounded they were breaking the city from the inside out. Musk's vision had never been about total collapse, it was about quiet, unstoppable pressure. He passed a broken kiosk where screens flickered, random data maps fragmented, grids misaligned, numbers blinking incoherently. Someone tried to call for help. The device emitted only static. Frustration rippled through the crowd like electricity. Faces turned toward him, their expressions frozen between hope and fear. They didn't see him as a savior, they saw him as part of the storm, part of the chaos. A soft metallic click behind him made him freeze. The figure in black had returned, indistinguishable from shadows, almost a phantom in the storm. Sparks flickered from the device clutched in their hands, illuminating eyes that were too precise, calculating too much. He felt the pulse of human fear against mechanical intent. Musk's words came back, sharper now. Automation will outpace humanity, and people won't even know until they're already caught. The rain intensified, soaking him to the bone, yet he could feel the city vibrating beneath his feet. An overturned streetcar hissed steam, the sound punctuating the quiet panic that had begun to ripple through citizens. Somewhere a transformer groaned, then exploded, sending shards of light and electricity into the air. Screams cut through the storm, a microwave of terror that rippled unpredictably. He moved toward the center of the chaos. Neon signs flickered across puddles in fragmented colors, painting distorted reflections of the fleeing crowd. A small group had cornered a delivery drone, swinging sticks and metal pipes, oblivious to the consequences. The machines were part of the story now, both antagonist and symptom, and he could feel Musk's prediction as a living force in the streets. From the shadows, the figure in black manipulated the device again. Sparks jumped, and systems stuttered. Streetlights flickered, automated gates froze mid-lift, and drones wobbled in the sky like wounded birds. The city's rhythm fractured, micro-failures cascading like a chain reaction. Panic spread silently, visibly, in eyes darting, shoulders tensing, voices rising. A sudden explosion in a distant building sent shards of concrete tumbling into the street. People screamed, stumbled, and scattered. The storm above seemed to intensify in response, rain slashing sideways, lightning flashing in violent arcs. He felt the city's pulse accelerate, systems, human and machine, converging into a rhythm of tension, fracture, and anticipation. Footsteps approached closer. Metallic hisses punctuated wet concrete, shadows shifted unnaturally. He sensed the figure behind him, manipulating chaos like a conductor of an orchestra no one else could hear. Musk's prediction, America reshaped by automation, ambition, and invisible forces, was unfolding in real time, and humanity's fragility was the instrument. He glanced at the crowd again. Faces were masks of confusion and fear. People pushed past one another, trying to escape small micro-disasters. Drones glitching mid-flight, lights failing, automated doors locking unexpectedly. The city's systems, designed to make life easier, had become agents of disorientation and panic. He exhaled slowly, eyes scanning for patterns, for signs of order among the chaos, knowing that this was only the first wave. A drone buzzed overhead, lights flickering, scanning, recording its quiet surveillance, a reminder that no movement went unnoticed. Someone nearby tripped over wet debris. The soft, metallic thud was swallowed by thunder. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the plaza, the collapsed streets, the panicked faces, and the shadows slipping through the chaos. He caught a glimpse of the figure in black manipulating the device again, sparks jumping with every press, bending the micro-events of the city toward disruption. A small group huddled beneath a broken canopy, trying to shelter a child, but fear made their movements jagged, awkward, systems failing subtly, humans reacting instinctively. Musk's vision manifested in microfractures of daily life. Every failed drone, every flickering light, every hesitation amplified the sense that the world was shifting beneath their feet. He realized then the true scale of the disruption, not destruction, not outright collapse but cumulative fracture, imperceptible at first, becoming impossible to ignore. Neon reflections shimmered across rain puddles, multiplying the chaos infinitely. Systems and humans intertwined in tension, anticipation, and quiet panic. The figure in black vanished into the storm again, leaving the device sparking and hissing in the wet asphalt. He approached cautiously, hearing the subtle hum of electricity and machinery. The city's rhythm had changed irreversibly. The first visible fractures of Musk's predicted future were evident in the trembling infrastructure, glitching technology, and human hesitation. A siren cut sharply through the storm, human and automated in a chaotic duet. He felt the weight of inevitability pressing against him, the subtle panic around him feeding into the city's pulse. People were adapting too slowly, reacting too late, and machines moved faster than comprehension allowed. He exhaled, letting rain wash over his face, neon reflections distorting his expression. The city had begun writing a new story, one measured in micro-events, failed systems, and human reactions. Musk's prediction of subtle, unstoppable transformation had taken shape, quiet, terrifying, and inescapable. Thunder rolled again, louder this time, shaking buildings and asphalt alike. Footsteps approached behind him, deliberate, purposeful. Shadows moved, figures unseen yet present, orchestrating microfractures across streets and plazas. The city breathed around him, alive, calculating, testing humanity with every heartbeat. He whispered under his breath, almost philosophically, "This is just the beginning." And somewhere in the storm, a voice carried faintly, deliberately, almost like a warning. "Soon, it will all fracture further." The rain continued, relentless. He moved forward, wet asphalt slick beneath his feet, neon reflections dancing and multiplying. The city pulsed with systems failing, humans adapting, machines calculating, and the tension was unbearable, electric. Musk's prediction wasn't theory, it was a rhythm, unstoppable, inevitable, alive. And somewhere, in the distant shadows, the figure in black whispered again, faint but clear, "Soon. Some disasters begin not with a bang, but with the subtle failing of trust." The city had changed entirely. Streets shimmered with water and neon, reflections fractured like broken mirrors. The storm above had grown violent, wind lashing sideways, rain hammering metal and asphalt. Every sound, the hiss of steam, the whir of drones, the clatter of debris merged into a cacophony that vibrated through the bones. America's pulse was jagged, irregular, alive. People ran now, their movements frantic, instinctive. A mother grabbed her child, weaving through a swarm of scattered pedestrians, faces pale, eyes wide with confusion. Automated vehicles stalled mid-street, their lights flickering in patterns that made the chaos appear choreographed. Musk's prediction of society outpaced by its own infrastructure had arrived, tangible and terrifying. He moved through the chaos, feet slipping on wet asphalt, glancing at every puddle that reflected fractured neon. Distant explosions punctuated the storm, transformers failing, sparks scattering across the street like fireflies in panic. The figure in black appeared again, emerging from a shadowed alley. Sparks jumped from a device clutched in their hands, hissing and sizzling, manipulating systems with precise movements. A low rumble ran beneath his feet, the subway below had fractured further. Steam hissed from vents, and the metallic screech of misaligned rails echoed through narrow streets. People screamed, stumbled, collided. The chaos was no longer subtle. It was visible, audible, inescapable. Musk's vision was no longer prophecy, it was reality. He watched drones circle above, their lights flickering in sync with failing streetlights. The city had become an organism, alive and unpredictable, guided by human panic and technological instability alike. Every failure cascaded, every hesitation amplified, every glance carried weight. The first full systemic fractures were manifesting everywhere: traffic gridlock, communication collapse, power outages. The rhythm of control had died. Footsteps echoed behind him, soft but deliberate. He didn't turn. The figure in black moved like a shadow, orchestrating subtle calamities. Sparks leapt from devices onto wet pavement, short-circuiting drones, creating micro-explosions that sent small shards of glass flying. A cyclist crashed into a fallen pole, metal clanging against wet asphalt. Fear was a contagion, moving faster than thought. A siren split the storm. People froze mid-step, their panic mirrored in their eyes. Children cried, phones buzzed with static, screens flickered, lights went dark, and automated doors locked unexpectedly. Society's skeleton, once invisible, had been exposed, fractured, chaotic, and terrifyingly fragile. He exhaled sharply, eyes scanning the crowd. People collided, shouted, and scrambled, desperate to find order where none existed. Neon reflections fractured every face, multiplying fear into infinite variations. Someone shouted instructions, another tried to calm a group, but their words were swallowed by the storm, the hiss of malfunctioning machinery, the drone's mechanical hum. From above, a bolt of lightning split the sky, illuminating overturned cars, puddles shimmering with neon, and faces twisted in panic. The figure in black moved again, pressing another sequence into the device. Sparks leapt, systems stuttered, and another wave of micro-failures spread across the streets. Automated vehicles lurched, lights flickered, and drones veered uncontrollably. Humanity was reacting too slowly to the pace of technological chaos. He ducked behind a fallen sign, soaked through, watching. People surged, tripped, collided. Somewhere, a transformer exploded violently, sending shards of metal into the air, and the scent of ozone mixed with burning circuitry. The storm seemed to respond, wind thrashing violently, lightning striking unpredictably. Every failure amplified the next. Every hesitation propagated the panic. Footsteps grew louder, closer. The figure in black appeared again, emerging from shadows like an agent of the storm itself. Sparks jumped from devices, short-circuiting nearby systems. Panic rippled through humans like electricity. Musk's warning of infrastructure outpacing human adaptation played out in visceral beats, tangible and unstoppable. He moved forward, scanning neon reflections and puddles for patterns in the chaos. A group huddled beneath a crumbling canopy, shielding a child, trying to navigate the fractured city. Automated gates froze mid-lift, streetlights flickered in irregular beats, and drones hovered erratically. Systems designed to protect and optimize life had become catalysts of disorientation. From a distance, a soft mechanical whir announced drones, descending closer to the ground, scanning, analyzing, predicting every micro-movement. He could feel the city's pulse jagged, accelerating, unpredictable. The storm intensified, rain slashing sideways, wind tearing at clothing, lightning fracturing neon reflections. He realized the city was no longer a backdrop, it was a character, a predator, a test. The figure in black vanished into a shadowed alley again, leaving devices hissing, sparks dancing on wet asphalt. He stepped forward, witnessing the first full collapse. Intersections gridlocked, communications offline, drones crashing, human panic at its peak. Musk's prediction had manifested fully. The quiet micro-fractures of the previous days had cascaded into visible, unstoppable disorder. A distant explosion sent windows rattling, debris scattering. People screamed, bolted, collided. Neon reflections fractured infinitely in puddles. The storm responded, amplifying the chaos. Footsteps approached behind him, deliberate, precise, yet indistinguishable among the storm. The city tested every human instinct, every capacity to adapt. He exhaled, letting rain wash over him, knowing the next phase had begun. Humans scrambled, machines faltered, systems failed, and the city pulsed with life, chaos, and inevitability. Musk's predictions had arrived in full force, not as theory, but as living, breathing reality. A final lightning strike illuminated the city. Neon reflected across puddles, streets twisted in fractured symmetry, and faces of panic multiplied endlessly. Somewhere, mechanical clicks and electrical hisses orchestrated further chaos. The figure in black whispered from the shadows, faint but deliberate, "Soon." And he knew, with certainty, that no one in the city would forget the storm, the failures, the fractures, or the rhythm of the collapse. The next 5 years would be measured in moments like these. silent microfractures erupting into visible chaos, testing humanity against systems it could no longer fully control. Even in collapse, some refused to surrender to chaos. The storm had begun to ebb slightly, though the city still shivered under rain-slicked streets and flickering neon. Steam hissed from vents, dripping water, and the metallic scent of electricity hung heavy in the air. Somewhere, a transformer smoldered silently, sparks flickering like dying fireflies. America's skeleton was exposed, fractured systems, failing machines, and panicked humans, but he wasn't alone in navigating it. A group had gathered in the remains of an abandoned subway station, faces wet, eyes sharp, bodies tense. They were not civilians, they were organizers, planners, and improvisers. Makeshift radios buzzed with static, flashlights cut through smoke and shadow, and maps, tattered and wet, were spread across broken benches. For the first time, there was a semblance of order amid the chaos. He approached cautiously, scanning the environment. Drones hovered outside, lights flickering intermittently. The figure in black was nowhere visible, but the motif lingered. Mechanical clicks, distant whirs, and faint electrical hums suggested unseen observers. Musk's vision systems, outpacing human adaptation, was still in motion, but now humans were beginning to respond. A woman spoke softly, voice steady but urgent. "We need to stabilize power to the communications hub. If we don't, we won't coordinate the next step." She pointed to a tangle of exposed wires and malfunctioning panels. A man nodded, hands moving with practiced precision, adjusting circuits, rerouting lines, reconnecting broken nodes. The storm outside seemed to pause momentarily as humans attempted to reclaim control. Footsteps echoed from the upper stairwell, deliberate and measured. Everyone froze. Metallic hisses punctuated the tension. The figure in black was close, unseen, yet present, orchestrating disruptions with mechanical precision. Sparks leapt from a device they carried, and somewhere nearby, lights flickered violently, testing the group's resolve. He stepped forward, whispering to the organizers, "We can't let them predict our movements. We need unpredictability." Heads nodded, eyes meeting his with silent understanding. Strategy was forming not in boardrooms, but in the wet, chaotic streets, among people who had no choice but to adapt fast. Musk's prediction of quiet, unstoppable disruption now had a counterforce. Human ingenuity under pressure. Outside, drones buzzed closer, lights scanning systematically. Thunder rumbled above, punctuating the sound of panicked movement in the city. Somewhere, distant explosions continued. Transformers failing, cars stalled mid-street. The environment was hostile, unpredictable, but the group worked with focus, rerouting power, securing communication lines, improvising tools from remnants of technology. A young man's hands trembled slightly as he adjusted a circuit. Sparks flew, hissing against wet concrete, and a siren wailed in the distance. The tension was palpable, every mistake amplified, every hesitation visible, yet determination held stronger than fear. Musk's vision had predicted collapse, but humans, he realized, had a resilience that algorithms could not anticipate. Footsteps approached from behind, soft, deliberate. The figure in black was near again, hidden in shadows, manipulating disruptions with precision. Sparks jumped, lights flickered, and systems stuttered, but the group continued, adapting in real time. Panic was no longer their master. Strategy, improvisation, and collaboration were beginning to guide their actions. A bolt of lightning illuminated the station momentarily, revealing wet concrete, scattered debris, and faces determined in fear. Neon reflections danced across puddles, multiplying the tension infinitely. Someone shouted directions. Another adjusted a device. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside chaos, but structured by the rhythm of human response. He moved to a malfunctioning control panel, damp hands steady despite the cold and wet. Sparks jumped from exposed circuits, hissing into the air. He rerouted lines, reactivated systems, and felt the first subtle pulse of order returning. Drones outside shifted erratically, thrown off by unpredictable human interventions. Musk's vision automation, surpassing humans, was being contested. The woman in charge, eyes sharp, whispered, Keep them guessing. Don't let them anticipate our next move. The figure in black, unseen but audible through mechanical hisses and metallic clicks, was the ever-present antagonist, but humans now had rhythm, improvisation, and creativity on their side. Each rerouted line, each restored circuit, each calculated move was a micro-victory. From a distance, another explosion shook the station, sending fragments of concrete falling. People ducked instinctively, then resumed their work, undeterred. Lightning flashed, neon reflected in puddles, and the storm seemed to pulse in response to the intensity of human determination. Musk's predictions had set the stage, but humans were improvising the choreography now. He glanced at the young man adjusting circuits, hands no longer trembling. Confidence was growing, small victories compounding, visible in movements, glances, and the faint rhythm of breathing among the group. Systems flickered and stuttered, but humans were learning to adapt faster than predicted, improvising at the pace machines struggled to match. The figure in black remained an omnipresent shadow, manipulating, observing, challenging. Yet every disruption they orchestrated was countered with human ingenuity, subtle improvisation, and tactical improvisation. Musk's vision of an unstoppable, quiet collapse was now being challenged, contested in microbeats of resistance. Outside, the storm continued. Relentless, but humans were beginning to map the chaos, understand the rhythm of failing systems, and reclaim fragments of control. Neon reflections multiplied, casting infinite possibilities on puddles and wet asphalt. But humans were learning to move unpredictably, creatively, and decisively. He whispered to the group, almost philosophically, "Chaos is predictable if we read it carefully." Heads nodded, eyes meeting his with understanding. Improvisation, strategy, and collaboration had become weapons against systemic collapse, against the quiet, mechanical orchestration of disruption. Musk's prediction had come true, but humans were proving their capacity to adapt. The figure in black hissed again, faint and deliberate, somewhere outside. Sparks from devices leapt into wet asphalt, but the group moved with fluidity, improvising around each disruption. The storm pulsed, systems failed, but human ingenuity flowed faster, unpredictable, and alive. Lightning split the sky, illuminating puddles, debris, and determined faces. Neon fractured infinitely in reflections, casting an almost surreal backdrop to the organized resistance forming below. Systems could fail, machines could glitch, and panic could spread, but humans had begun to reclaim the narrative. He exhaled, rain washing over him, eyes sharp. The first organized counter-movement had begun. Micro-victories, improvisation, and collaborative strategy were forming the initial foundation of reclaiming the city. Musk's predicted trajectory had collided with human resilience, and the results were visible, dynamic, and cinematic. Footsteps echoed faintly behind him, soft, deliberate, metallic hisses punctuating each step. The figure in black remained a threat, unseen but present. Yet humans had rhythm, creativity, and unpredictability now. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside, chaos, tension, but also organized resistance emerging from fragments of fear. He whispered almost to himself, "We adapt, we resist, we reclaim," and somewhere in the shadows, faint yet deliberate, the antagonist's mechanical motif whispered back, "Soon, but not yet." When survival becomes strategy, every second counts twice. The city had grown chaotic in ways that were impossible to track. Streets shimmered with rain and neon, reflecting broken signs and fractured lights. Steam hissed from vents, mingling with the acrid scent of burned circuitry. Distant sirens punctuated the tension, drones hummed overhead, and somewhere, electrical sparks crackled like invisible whispers. Humans moved like currents through the chaos. Makeshift barricades were erected at intersections, improvised communication lines buzzed, and small groups coordinated movements across fractured streets. The first organized resistance had spread beyond the subway stations, forming pockets of control amid systemic failure. Musk's vision of quiet collapse now collided with deliberate, adaptive human response. He advanced cautiously, scanning reflections in puddles, tracking irregular patterns of lights and movements. The figure in black had returned, emerging from shadows with mechanical precision. Sparks leapt from a device in their hands, hissing through the stormy air, short-circuiting nearby drones. Panic rippled around them, but humans responded with improvisation, blocking drones, rerouting power, signaling each other with coded flashes of neon light. In a nearby plaza, a group of civilians had overturned vehicles into barricades. They shouted instructions, coordinated with makeshift radios, and adapted strategies in real time. Lightning split the sky, illuminating determined faces, wet clothing plastered to bodies, and eyes that refused to be broken by fear. The storm mirrored the human pulse, jagged, unpredictable, alive. He ducked behind a fractured wall as sparks from a device danced across wet asphalt. Metallic hisses and mechanical clicks echoed from the figure in black, manipulating chaos with relentless precision. Yet humans were unpredictable now. Every system failure, every drone disruption was countered with improvisation, wires rerouted, devices repurposed, movements calculated to evade and survive. Musk's prediction of automation outpacing humanity was being contested. A distant transformer exploded violently, sending shards of metal and concrete into the rain. Screams erupted, but so did resilience. Humans moved through the chaos like currents, adapting to systemic failures with instinctive precision. He watched a young man leap over a fallen barrier, adjusting a makeshift circuit as sparks flew past. Each micro-action became a statement. Humans could adapt faster than the machine's rhythm of destruction. Footsteps approached behind him, soft, deliberate, metallic hisses, punctuating each step. The figure in black moved with fluid precision, orchestrating disruptions from the shadows. Sparks jumped from devices, drones crashed mid-flight, and automated doors locked unexpectedly. But humans were improvising faster, moving unpredictably, reclaiming small patches of control. A group had taken control of a partially functioning communication hub. Radios crackled, flashes of light signaled coordination, and instructions carried across rain-soaked streets. Neon reflections fractured across puddles, multiplying the tension. Systems that once caused disorientation now served as terrain for tactical advantage. Musk's predicted collapse had created the arena. Human ingenuity defined the fight. Lightning illuminated a street littered with overturned vehicles and debris. A small squad moved in unison, guiding civilians through gaps in failing systems. Sparks from electrical failures danced across wet asphalt, reflecting in puddles, and the storm's intensity seemed to respond to the choreography of human adaptation. The figure in black observed, manipulating micro-failures, but unpredictability had become the human's weapon. He moved to a control panel, exposed wires hissing and sparking, rain dripping from every surface. Fingers worked quickly, rerouting circuits, stabilizing microsystems, and restoring partial control. Outside, drones veered off course, disrupted by human improvisation. Musk's vision automation surpassing humans was being challenged, contested in micro-beats of resilience. From above, lightning split the sky again. Neon signs flickered, puddles reflected fractured light, and screams echoed through wet streets. The storm amplified tension, chaos, and stakes. Systems failed, drones fell, humans adapted, and the figure in black continued manipulating from the shadows. Every step, every action mattered. He whispered, almost philosophically, "Predictability is their weakness. Adaptability is ours." Heads nodded in the nearby squad, eyes meeting with silent understanding. Improvisation, strategy, and collective action had become the countermeasure to systemic collapse. Musk's predictions had set the stage. Humans were now directing the narrative. A distant explosion shook the city, sending shards of glass into the air. Screams and mechanical hisses intertwined, creating a tense rhythm. The figure in black hissed faintly, manipulating another device. Sparks leaping, drones faltering, lights flickering. Yet humans moved with unpredictability, improvising pathways, rerouting circuits, signaling through neon flashes. The storm above seemed to breathe in response. Rain lashed sideways, wind tore at clothing, and thunder punctuated every movement. The city itself had become a living battleground, a test of human resilience against automation and calculated disruption. Musk's vision of subtle collapse was now a tangible arena of survival and strategy. He exhaled, letting the rain soak him, scanning puddles for irregular patterns, shadows for movement, and reflections for hidden threats. Humans coordinated, adapted, improvised. Drones faltered, lights flickered, and the antagonist's mechanical motifs tested every response. The pulse of the city, jagged, unpredictable, alive, drove the rhythm of confrontation. In the heart of the plaza, a group had constructed a makeshift command center. Wet maps, sparking devices, and blinking radios formed a tableau of resistance. The figure in black lurked in peripheral shadows, orchestrating chaos, but unpredictability and ingenuity now shaped human survival. Musk's predictions had manifested fully, yet humanity was responding with emergent intelligence. Lightning illuminated wet streets, neon fractured in reflections, and the storm intensified, amplifying every sound: cries, mechanical hisses, distant explosions, and the hum of electricity. Footsteps approached from all directions. Humans moved unpredictably, strategically, collaboratively. Chaos had a rhythm, and humans were beginning to write their own. He whispered again, eyes scanning puddles for patterns. "We reclaim one step at a time." Sparks from a device jumped onto wet asphalt, hissing, but humans adapted instantly. Systems failed, drones crashed, the storm raged, but improvisation, coordination, and resilience defined the city's new pulse. Musk's vision was no longer prophecy, it was the battlefield, and humans were fighting back. The figure in black vanished into the shadows, leaving micro-failures in their wake. But humans moved faster, reacted unpredictably, and reclaimed control over fractured systems. Neon reflections danced infinitely in puddles, illustrating the tension, the stakes, and the improvisation that now guided survival. Thunder rolled overhead, wet streets glimmering with neon and debris. Systems failed, drones crashed, humans adapted. The storm was relentless, mechanical motifs omnipresent, but resilience pulsed through the city in microbeats of strategy and improvisation. Musk's prediction of collapse had collided with human ingenuity, and the battle for control had truly begun. In the heart of chaos, the smallest choices ignite revolutions. The city was no longer a labyrinth of fear, it had become a battlefield of calculated improvisation. Rain-slicked streets reflected fractured neon, puddles trembling with sparks from failing systems. The storm had slowed but not ended, a rhythmic drumbeat above as lightning split the sky intermittently. Sparks and hisses from damaged electronics punctuated the urban symphony, keeping everyone alert, tense, alive. From the makeshift command center in a crumbled plaza, leaders issued instructions with quiet authority. Radios buzzed with static, flashlights signaled movements, and improvisational strategies spread through pockets of resistance. Each restored circuit, each rerouted line, each reclaimed control point was a small victory, but in the storm's chaos, victory was never guaranteed. He ducked behind a fragmented wall, watching as humans moved with emergent precision. A squad guided a group of terrified civilians through an alley strewn with debris, recalibrating a broken drone to distract automated surveillance. Sparks flew from exposed wires, hissing like whispers of the storm, while neon signs fractured in puddles, multiplying shadows infinitely. Musk's predicted collapse had created the arena. Human ingenuity was shaping the fight. Footsteps echoed from the periphery, soft, deliberate. The figure in black had returned, unseen, but orchestrating micro-failures with relentless precision. Sparks leapt from devices, drones faltered, and electrical panels flickered. Yet humans adapted instantly, improvising routes, rerouting power, and signaling one another with coded flashes. Each move was a test, each reaction a statement. Chaos could be countered with creativity. From the upper floors of a nearby building, a young woman manipulated a device, sending pulses of electromagnetic disruption through drones patrolling the streets. A faint hiss followed each pulse, metallic and precise, as the antagonist's surveillance faltered. He observed quietly, recognizing that Musk's vision system's surpassing human adaptability was being challenged. Improvisation and unpredictability had become weapons of survival. Thunder rolled overhead, the storm responding as if alive, amplifying every sound: distant explosions, hissing sparks, clattering debris, and the hum of disrupted drones. Neon reflections multiplied in puddles, casting chaotic light on determined faces. The figure in black hissed again, faint and deliberate, somewhere unseen, their devices manipulating failures across the city. Humans moved unpredictably, improvising micro-solutions, reclaiming control in tiny but meaningful victories. He exhaled sharply, feeling the weight of both storm and city pressing down. Each restored circuit, each successfully guided civilian, Each improvisation against automated systems was a ripple in a growing tide. Musk's predicted trajectory of systemic collapse was still active, but humans were creating countercurrents, changing the dynamics in real time. A distant explosion shook a street corner. A transformer blew, showering sparks into the wet night. Shouts of alarm rose, then were replaced by swift action. Makeshift barricades were reinforced, drones were redirected, and power lines rerouted to restore communication nodes. Chaos had become the canvas for human ingenuity, and they were painting with deliberate strokes. The figure in black emerged briefly from a shadowed alley, a silhouette against flickering neon. Sparks danced from a device in their hands, mechanical hisses punctuating each movement. Their presence was a constant threat, but the human's improvisational rhythm disrupted the antagonist's choreography. Musk's predictions of quiet, unstoppable disruption had collided with unpredictable human strategy, creating a tense, dynamic equilibrium. From the plaza, he observed the first, large-scale reclaiming of control. Automated gates were overridden, drones disabled through makeshift devices, and groups of humans coordinated movement through the fractured streets. Each action was measured, each decision consequential. Neon signs flickered, reflections fractured in puddles, and the storm's rhythm echoed the pulse of human resilience. He moved to a malfunctioning control panel, wet hands steady despite the storm. Sparks flew, hissing across wet asphalt, yet each adjustment restored microsystems, allowing coordination to expand across neighborhoods. Musk's prediction of human systems being overwhelmed by automation was being rewritten. Adaptation, improvisation, and collaboration were now shaping outcomes. Footsteps approached, deliberate, mechanical. The figure in black whispered, faint but audible, somewhere near, manipulating devices to sow disruption. Yet, humans moved unpredictably, rerouting power, signaling with neon reflections, improvising paths through chaos. The storm seemed to pulse in response, rain slicing sideways, thunder punctuating each calculated movement. He whispered to the squad nearby, almost philosophically, "Every choice now multiplies our survival." Heads nodded, eyes meeting in silent agreement. Improvisation, strategy, and collective resilience were now the weapons that challenged the systemic collapse. Sparks from devices jumped onto wet asphalt, hissing, but humans adapted instantly, turning threat into opportunity. From above, lightning illuminated the urban battlefield, neon reflections fracturing infinitely in puddles and broken glass. Explosions erupted in distant streets, drones crashed mid-flight, but humans moved with coordination and improvisational skill. The figure in black continued orchestrating micro-disasters, but unpredictability and human creativity countered every attempt. In one alley, a young man guided a group of civilians past a failing drone, signaling with flashes of neon light. Sparks danced from electrical panels, hissing across puddles. He moved with them, wet clothes plastered to skin, muscles taut. Each micro-victory was a statement. Chaos could be navigated, even dominated, when ingenuity and collaboration intersected. The figure in black whispered again, mechanical hisses, punctuating each syllable. But the humans moved faster, improvised more creatively, and reclaimed control of critical nodes. Musk's predicted trajectory had collided with emergent human intelligence, creating a battle of rhythms, mechanical precision against adaptive unpredictability. He paused briefly on a rain-slicked street, eyes scanning neon reflections, puddles, and shadows. Every micro-failure orchestrated by the antagonist was being countered, every disrupted drone reclaimed or disabled. Improvisation had become the currency of survival, and humans were rich. Musk's predictions were alive in the backdrop, but the story was now being rewritten moment by moment. Thunder rolled once more, illuminating puddles, debris, and determined faces. Sparks from damaged devices hissed, mechanical motifs persisted, and the storm's rhythm intertwined with human improvisation. Systems failed, drones crashed, yet resilience pulsed through the city in microbeats of strategy, collaboration, and choice. He whispered softly, letting the words carry over the storm, "We fight with every small step. Chaos bends to those who adapt." And somewhere in the shadows, faint and deliberate, the figure in black whispered back, "Soon, but not yet." In the storm's eye, truth and chaos collide. The city had become a living organism of chaos and resistance. Streets were slick with rain, neon fractured across puddles and shattered glass. Steam hissed from broken vents, mingling with the acrid smell of burnt circuitry. Every corner held both threat and opportunity. Systems that once governed life were failing spectacularly, while humans adapted, improvised, and reclaimed fragments of control. From a rooftop, he watched the sprawling chaos. Drones circled erratically, mechanical motifs punctuated the storm, and sparks from disrupted devices danced like fireflies. The figure in black had returned, moving unseen, orchestrating disruptions with cold precision. But humans had learned to predict patterns, improvise pathways, and anticipate interference. Musk's predicted collapse had created the stage. Now the final act was unfolding. Footsteps echoed from alleys, deliberate and synchronized with hissing sparks and the low hum of damaged drones. In the streets below, groups of humans coordinated movements, rerouted power, and reclaimed nodes of control. Every restored circuit, every improvised barricade, every disabled drone was a micro-victory, a testament to resilience. The storm above pulsed in rhythm with their efforts, thunder punctuating calculated steps. He descended into the plaza, where the resistance had centralized. Wet maps, blinking radios, and sparking devices formed a chaotic command hub. Leaders issued orders in clipped, efficient phrases. Improvisation dictated the tempo. Every decision rippled across the streets. The city's pulse was jagged but alive, a living testament to adaptation against systemic failure. Suddenly, an explosion shook a nearby building. Flames licked the wet walls, and shards of glass fell across the street. Screams pierced the storm, but the squad moved with precision. Civilians were guided past hazards, drones disabled, power rerouted. Every action had weight, every choice mattered. The figure in black emerged briefly from a shadowed doorway, sparks leaping from a device. Metallic hisses punctuated the tension, yet unpredictability had become humans' weapon. Lightning split the sky, illuminating faces tense with determination, clothing plastered by rain, eyes sharp with awareness. The storm's rhythm mirrored the city's pulse, jagged, chaotic, alive. Humans had learned the patterns of failure and were exploiting them, improvising survival strategies in real time. Musk's prediction of quiet systemic collapse was no longer prophecy, it was the battlefield where humans and technology clashed. He moved toward a malfunctioning control hub, exposed wires sizzling in the rain. Fingers worked quickly, rerouting power, stabilizing systems, coordinating movements. Sparks jumped across puddles, hissing like whispers in the storm. Drones faltered. Automated doors locked unpredictably, but humans adapted. Improvisation was no longer optional, it was survival. The figure in black hissed from the shadows, mechanical, precise, orchestrating failures across multiple nodes. Yet humans countered with unpredictability. Each micro-victory compounded, restored communication lines, improvised barricades, strategic diversions. The antagonist's orchestration was impressive, but human ingenuity had become a living countermeasure. From an upper floor, a young woman manipulated an electromagnetic device, sending pulses that disabled drones mid-flight. Sparks danced across wet asphalt, neon fractured in puddles. The figure in black paused, sensing disruption, recalculating. Humans moved faster, adapting to interference with instinctive precision. The storm seemed to respond, wind slicing sideways, thunder punctuating every step. A distant transformer exploded violently. Debris scattered, sparks flew, and the acrid smell of ozone filled the air. Panic surged through the streets. Yet humans pressed forward. Improvisation dictated rhythm, coordination dictated survival. Every restored circuit, rerouted line, and guided civilian was a statement. The city was no longer at the mercy of collapse. He exhaled sharply, scanning puddles for reflections, shadows for movement, neon for signals. Each micro-failure orchestrated by the antagonist was now an opportunity for human counteraction. The storm, the city, and the antagonist's devices created a chaotic symphony, but humans had learned to play within it, improvising rhythmically, strategically, and decisively. Footsteps approached from multiple directions. Sparks leapt from hissing devices. The figure in black emerged fully, silhouette sharp against flickering neon. Devices in hand, they orchestrated precise disruptions. Drones crashed, lights flickered, systems failed. Yet humans moved unpredictably, improvising paths, reclaiming nodes, signaling through fractured neon reflections. Musk's vision of collapse was being rewritten in real time. Lightning illuminated the plaza, casting shadows that multiplied infinitely across puddles, debris, and determined faces. Humans guided each other through hazards, rerouted power, and disabled automated threats. Improvisation and collaboration had become weapons as powerful as any machine. The figure in black hissed again, mechanical and precise, but unpredictability now dictated the city's pulse. He whispered to the squad nearby, almost philosophically, "Every micro-choice shapes the battlefield." Heads nodded in silent agreement. Each restored circuit, each improvised diversion, each calculated step compounded resilience. Musk's predicted collapse had created the environment. Human ingenuity now dictated outcomes. From the rooftops, drones reeled, faltered, and crashed. Sparks leapt from devices left in disarray by improvisational sabotage. Civilians guided safely through hazards. Communication restored incrementally. Power lines rerouted successfully. Chaos still reigned, but humans were writing the rhythm, shaping the battlefield with emergent strategy. The figure in black paused in the shadows, recalculating, sensing the shift. Their mechanical hisses punctuated each observation. Sparks danced on wet asphalt, reflecting fractured neon. Yet, unpredictability and improvisation had tilted the balance. Musk's vision of automation, surpassing humans, had collided with adaptive ingenuity, and for the first time, humans were seizing the narrative. Thunder rolled overhead, rain slicing sideways, puddles fracturing reflections infinitely. Systems failed, drones fell, fires burned, yet micro-victories multiplied. Improvisation, coordination, and human resilience pulsed through the city in chaotic rhythm. Musk's prediction of systemic collapse was real, but survival now depended on creativity, unpredictability, and decisive choice. He paused briefly, scanning the streets, puddles, and shadows. Every micro-failure orchestrated by the antagonist had been countered, every disruption navigated. Improvisation dictated survival, collaboration dictated progress, and resilience dictated the city's pulse. The figure in black whispered faintly, mechanical, deliberate, soon, but not yet. When the storm subsides, the city exhales and survival leaves its mark. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, streaking streets with silver light and puddles that mirrored fractured neon. The storm still whispered in the alleys, but the roar had diminished, leaving a fragile calm. The city exhaled, trembling from exhaustion, debris scattered, sparks still hissing from damaged circuits. It was a city changed its pulse, jagged, alive, and wary. He walked through streets littered with overturned vehicles, broken signs, and shattered glass, each step careful, calculated. The figure in black was gone, vanished into the shadows, leaving traces of mechanical disruption. Sparks popped from malfunctioning devices, faint reminders of the chaos that had passed. Musk's predicted collapse had arrived in full force. But humans had endured, adapted, and reclaimed fragments of their world. Civilians emerged cautiously from shelters, faces wet with rain and relief, eyes scanning streets for lingering threats. Improvised barricades remained, now markers of survival and ingenuity. Flashlights and neon reflections traced pathways through puddles, illuminating small victories, restored communication lines, functioning generators, and coordinated safe zones. The storm had tested them all. Yet, creativity, adaptability, and resilience had persisted. You may, he paused at a fractured control hub. Fingers moved over, sparking panels, rerouting circuits to stabilize energy flow. Drones, disabled and scattered, lay like fallen sentinels across wet asphalt. Sparks hissed faintly, mechanical motifs lingering in the corners. But humans moved with rhythm now, guided by intuition, improvisation, and strategy learned in the chaos. Musk's predictions were present, but the story had shifted. Humans had written a new narrative. From above, lightning still flickered occasionally, painting streets with brief, jagged illumination. Shadows stretched across puddles and debris, multiplying infinitely. A young woman guided a small group of civilians through an alley, her hands wet and steady, eyes scanning the fractured city. Each micro-decision had saved lives. Every improvised strategy had rewritten the balance between chaos and survival. He exhaled, feeling the storm's energy drain from the city. Every restored circuit, rerouted line, and reclaimed system was a testament to ingenuity. Improvisation was no longer optional, it had become survival's language, spoken fluently by those who endured. Musk's vision of quiet collapse had collided with human adaptability, producing a city transformed, scarred but alive. In the central plaza, groups coordinated cleanup, repairing small sections of infrastructure. Sparks still popped from exposed wires, hissing in puddles, but life had returned to the streets. Neon reflections fractured across broken glass and wet asphalt, casting infinite variations of light. Systems that had threatened to overwhelm humanity now served as terrain for renewed order, guided by creativity and collaboration. The figure in black remained absent, yet traces lingered: micro-failures, hissing sparks, the occasional malfunctioning drone. Mechanical motifs hinted at continued presence, a ghost of chaos, but humans moved with confidence, improvising pathways, rerouting energy, and reclaiming territory. Musk's prediction of systemic collapse had left its mark, but survival depended on adaptation, unpredictability, and choice. He walked past puddles reflecting fractured neon, observing minor victories, functioning communication nodes, civilians guiding each other safely, improvised barricades still holding against minor disruptions. Every micro-action carried weight. Every decision rippled through the recovering city. The storm had created the arena, human ingenuity had dictated the rhythm. From a rooftop, a young man surveyed the streets. Sparks popped from damaged devices, mechanical hisses punctuating the calm. Yet humans had learned the patterns, improvising around failures, reclaiming microsystems, and creating pockets of safety. Musk's vision of automation outpacing humans had been challenged, rewritten by adaptation and collaboration. The storm had tested them, but they endured. He paused at a street corner, exhaling over the wet asphalt. Each spark, hissing device, and malfunctioning drone reminded him of the battle waged and the choices made. Improvisation, strategy, and resilience had become inseparable from survival. The figure in black had vanished, but the lessons remained. Chaos could be navigated, systems could be reclaimed, and humans could shape their destiny, even amid collapse. Thunder still rumbled in the distance. Faint, almost conciliatory. Rain fell in steady streams, washing debris into puddles, reflecting fractured neon endlessly. The city had transformed, scarred but alive, its pulse jagged, improvisational, and indomitable. Musk's vision had arrived, but humanity had written its own outcome. Civilians guided each other through the last damaged intersections, repaired communication lines blinked to life, and improvised generators hummed faintly. Sparks from broken circuits popped and hissed, but humans adapted instantly, reclaiming control. Improvisation had become instinct, strategy had become survival, and collaboration had become strength. He glanced at the horizon, neon fractured across wet streets, shadows stretching infinitely. The storm had passed, leaving the city battered but resilient. Musk's predictions had collided with human ingenuity, creating a new rhythm, one of chaos tempered by adaptation, collapse intersecting with resilience, destruction met with creativity. From the command hub, orders continued in clipped, efficient tones. Micro-decisions guided recovery, every improvisation ensured survival, and every human action reshaped the city's pulse. The figure in black had tested them, systems had challenged them, but human ingenuity had endured. The storm had left its mark, but survival had left a deeper one. He whispered softly, almost to himself, chaos tests, but adaptation defines. And somewhere, faint in the shadows, the city seemed to answer, we endure, we rebuild, we persist. Even after the storm, shadows remember. The city breathed slowly, a pulse returning after nights of chaos. Streets glistened with rain, neon reflections fractured across puddles and cracked glass, and the faint hiss of damaged electronics reminded everyone of what had passed. Yet the pulse was different now. jagged, unpredictable, alive with resilience. Humans had endured, adapted, and transformed the aftermath into new order. He walked along the empty streets, eyes scanning reflections, shadows, and lingering sparks. The figure in black was nowhere to be seen, yet traces remained: malfunctioning drones, hissing devices, and faint motifs of calculated disruption. The city had survived, but the presence of unseen antagonists lingered like a ghost, a reminder that vigilance was eternal. Musk's prediction of systemic collapse had come true, but humans had rewritten the story with ingenuity and improvisation. Small groups of civilians moved cautiously through streets, restoring communications, repairing generators, and guiding each other safely past residual hazards. Improvised barricades stood as monuments to resilience, micro-victories etched into wet asphalt. Neon lights flickered across puddles, fractured endlessly, reflecting the complexity of survival, chaos tempered by creativity, collapse met with adaptation. He paused at the central plaza, surveying the remnants of battle. Sparks popped faintly from damaged systems, hissing through puddles and shattered panels. The storm had passed, leaving destruction, but also opportunity. Every restored circuit, every reclaimed system, every improvised solution was a testament to the human spirit. Musk's vision of unstoppable collapse had collided with human unpredictability, and for now, ingenuity had won. From rooftops, faint movements caught his eye, people navigating streets with purpose, coordinating recovery, improvising solutions for ongoing failures. The figure in black had been absent for days, yet the threat was embedded in every malfunctioning system. The lesson lingered. Survival was temporary without vigilance. Adaptation was continuous, and creativity was the true weapon against entropy. He whispered to himself, almost in reverence, "Chaos tests, but resilience defines." Around him, the city seemed to echo back, "We endure, we adapt, we remember." Sparks hissed faintly in puddles. Mechanical motifs persisted in quiet corners, and neon fractured infinitely across wet streets, reflecting both destruction and hope. Time moved differently in the aftermath. Humans rebuilt, repaired, and learned, but every step carried the memory of disruption. Improvisation had become instinct, collaboration had become necessity, and vigilance had become second nature. Musk's prediction of collapse was no longer a distant idea, it had occurred, and the city had survived, scarred but unbroken. From a high vantage point, he observed the sprawling city, rain-soaked and fractured. Drones that survived fluttered weakly, sparks popped from lingering failures, and distant sirens cut through the calm. The storm had left a permanent rhythm in the urban pulse, jagged, improvisational, alive. Human ingenuity had prevailed, but the echoes of disruption lingered, a reminder that chaos was never fully gone. He exhaled, letting the weight of both storm and survival sink in. Every micro-choice, every improvisation, every reclaimed system had defined the city's new identity. Musk's prediction had been fulfilled in part, but the narrative had been rewritten by those who refused to yield. Chaos had tested them, but resilience had defined them. Neon fractured across puddles, reflecting infinite possibilities. Sparks hissed faintly from exposed wires, the faint hum of electricity creating a quiet rhythm. Humans moved through streets with purpose, rebuilding, improvising, and adapting. The figure in black had disappeared, but traces remained, reminders of what had been overcome and what could return. He whispered softly, almost philosophically, "We endure, we adapt, and we remain vigilant." The city seemed to respond in kind, quiet, alive, pulsing with the rhythm of survival. Musk's predictions of collapse had collided with human ingenuity, producing a city that was scarred, aware, and capable of shaping its own destiny. Even in calm, chaos lingered in the corners. Mechanical motifs hummed faintly in shadows, sparks popped from hissing panels, and distant reflections fractured across wet streets. Yet humans moved confidently, improvising, coordinating, rebuilding. The storm had left its mark, but human resilience left a deeper, permanent one. And somewhere, faint in the distance, a whisper of movement echoed. "We endure, we persist, and we remember." Even when the storm is gone, its shadows linger in the alleys. The city breathed differently now, quieter, but not peaceful. Rain had ceased, leaving streets slick with grime and neon reflections fractured across puddles and broken glass. Sparks popped faintly from damaged circuits, mechanical hisses lingering in corners, a reminder that chaos had not truly vanished. Humans moved cautiously, rebuilding, adapting, but every step carried the weight of memory and vigilance. From a rooftop, he scanned the streets. The figure in black had vanished, but traces remained: malfunctioning drones, sporadic system failures, and faint, deliberate motifs of disruption. Musk's predictions of collapse had been fulfilled, yet human ingenuity had prevailed. The city's pulse was jagged, alive, and unpredictable, a testament to improvisation and resilience. In the central plaza, civilians coordinated recovery. Improvised barricades were reinforced, generators hummed, and communication nodes flickered to life. Sparks popped across puddles, neon fractured in shards, illuminating the faces of those determined to reclaim normalcy. Improvisation was instinct, collaboration was survival, and vigilance was a quiet obsession. Footsteps echoed down an alley, faint and deliberate. The city had learned to move with rhythm, anticipating micro-failures, rerouting systems, and navigating hazards. Yet shadows remained alive with potential threat. The figure in black or others like them could return. Mechanical motifs whispered through broken devices, faint as a heartbeat but persistent. Musk's vision of systemic collapse was no longer theoretical, it had shaped reality, and humanity had adapted. He moved along streets, littered with debris and puddles, reflecting fractured neon. Sparks hissed faintly from exposed circuits. Each restored system, each improvised barricade, each coordinated movement was a ripple of resilience, reshaping the city's pulse. Chaos had tested them, but human creativity had won small victories that would define survival in the weeks to come. From a high vantage point, lightning briefly illuminated distant clouds, a reminder that storms, literal or metaphorical, could return. Drones flitted weakly across rooftops, some malfunctioning, some recovered. Civilians navigated streets with awareness, eyes scanning shadows, steps careful but purposeful. Improvisation had become instinct, strategy had become survival, adaptation had become identity. He paused at a damaged intersection. Sparks leapt from broken panels, hissing softly into puddles. Neon reflections fractured across wet asphalt. Micro-failures still tested coordination, but humans moved with precision, improvising around each disruption. Musk's predicted collapse had left its mark, yet human ingenuity had reshaped the outcome. From the rooftops, a young woman guided a small group through hazards. Hands wet but steady, eyes sharp. Every micro-choice had consequences, every improvisation rippled through the recovering city. The storm had passed, but its lessons remained. Vigilance, adaptability, and collaboration were essential. Mechanical hisses echoed faintly from the shadows. The figure in black had left traces, reminders that chaos could return in unexpected forms. Yet humans had learned to read the rhythm of failure, improvising countermeasures, reclaiming control over microsystems, and navigating streets with deliberate caution. Musk's vision of unstoppable systemic collapse had collided with human unpredictability, and human ingenuity had prevailed, shaping a new urban rhythm. He exhaled, scanning puddles, shadows, and flickering neon. Every restored circuit, every disabled drone, every improvised pathway was a testament to resilience. Chaos had tested them, improvisation had defined them. The city's pulse was jagged, alive, and full of potential, ready to face new storms, whether in weather, systems, or unseen antagonists. From the command hub, faint communication signals flickered to life. Coordination continued cautiously, orders clipped and efficient. Sparks hissed across wet asphalt, drones twitched intermittently, but humans adapted instantly. Improvisation had become instinct, creativity had become survival, and vigilance had become a permanent rhythm. He whispered softly, almost to himself, "Chaos remains, but we endure." And somewhere, faint in the shadows, the city seemed to answer, "We rebuild, we adapt, we remain." The storm had passed, but its echoes lingered. Mechanical motifs hummed softly from abandoned devices. Neon fractured endlessly across puddles and broken glass. Humans moved carefully, improvising, coordinating, adapting. Musk's predictions had shaped reality, but human resilience had redefined it. The city had survived, scarred but alive, its pulse jagged, improvisational, and ready for what was next. And somewhere, faint in the distance, a new whisper stirred, almost imperceptible. The storm is over, but not the struggle. Even in the calm, the city felt eyes watching from the shadows. Morning came slowly, filtered through a layer of lingering storm clouds. The streets glistened with residual rain, neon reflecting in puddles like fractured veins of light. The city's pulse was tentative, measured, yet every step carried the weight of memory scars from destruction, sparks from lingering failures, and the faint mechanical motifs of absent antagonists. Musk's predicted collapse had reshaped everything, leaving humans to navigate a world that demanded constant vigilance. He moved through a narrow alley, watching sparks pop from exposed circuits, puddles ripple under hurried footsteps. Improvised barricades had become permanent markers, guiding civilians safely through streets still pocked with hazards. Every movement was deliberate, every choice carried consequences. Humans had survived, but survival now required anticipation, reading shadows, predicting failures, improvising continuously. From the rooftops, drones flickered back to life, weak but functional. The figure in black or someone following the same pattern remained unseen, leaving traces. Intermittent system failures, hissing devices, and sparks dancing across the edges of puddles. Every trace was a reminder that chaos could return, but humans had learned to act before patterns became disasters. In the central plaza, teams coordinated micro-repairs, rerouting energy lines, restoring communication, and guiding civilians. Sparks popped faintly from exposed panels, hissing softly as if testing attention. Improvisation had become instinct, collaboration, necessity. The city was alive, jagged, improvisational, and vigilant. Musk's vision of collapse had come to pass, but human ingenuity had reshaped the aftermath. Footsteps echoed through empty streets. Shadows stretched across puddles, broken glass, and fractured neon reflections. Every movement carried rhythm, humans reading patterns, anticipating failures, and adjusting in real time. The figure in black remained unseen, a whisper of chaos lurking behind every malfunction. Sparks leapt from exposed wiring, and every hum of electricity reminded them that nothing was truly secure. He paused at a damaged intersection, scanning reflections in puddles. Drones fell sporadically, sparks leapt from malfunctioning panels, and faint hisses echoed from the shadows. Micro-failures tested coordination constantly, yet humans moved with instinctive improvisation, reclaiming control. One node at a time. Musk's predicted systemic collapse had created the terrain. Human ingenuity dictated the pace of recovery. From a rooftop vantage, he watched a young woman guide a small group through hazards. Her hands were wet, movements precise, eyes scanning every shadow. Improvisation had become second nature. Every choice rippled through the recovering city. The storm's lessons lingered. Vigilance, adaptability, and collaboration were essential. Mechanical hisses echoed faintly from abandoned devices. Sparks popped across puddles, illuminating fractured neon endlessly. The figure in black remained absent, but the motifs persisted, subtle and deliberate. Chaos had not vanished, it lingered in corners, in systems, in every weak link waiting to be exploited. Humans had survived, but survival demanded constant awareness and continuous improvisation. He exhaled, scanning puddles, shadows, and fractured neon. Every restored system, every improvised barricade, every disabled drone was a ripple of resilience. Chaos had tested them, but human ingenuity had defined them. Musk's prediction had arrived, yet the city had adapted. The pulse was jagged, improvisational, and alive with possibility. And the provisational. From the command hub, faint signals flickered through repaired communication lines. Orders were issued in clipped tones, coordinating micro-repairs, rerouting power, and restoring systems. Sparks popped softly from hissing panels, drones twitched intermittently. Humans adapted instantly, improvising and collaborating, reshaping the city's pulse. Survival had become instinct, ingenuity had become necessity, and vigilance had become permanent. He whispered, almost philosophically, even calm is a test. We endure by staying alert, and somewhere, faint in the shadows, the city seemed to answer. We watch, we adapt, we persist. The storm was over, yet traces remained. Sparks hissed from damaged devices, mechanical motifs hummed from broken systems, and neon fractured endlessly across puddles. Humans moved with careful confidence, improvising, coordinating, and adapting. Musk's predictions had defined the challenge, but human resilience had rewritten the rules. The city had survived, scarred but alive, jagged and ready for what came next. From a distant rooftop, faint movement caught his eye. Shadows shifted against the neon glow, deliberate and controlled. The figure in black or another following the same pattern was still present, observing, testing, waiting. Survival required awareness, improvisation, and constant adaptation. Musk's collapse had come. Now the next challenge loomed, enduring the lingering, subtle chaos that never fully disappears. He exhaled softly, letting the weight of responsibility settle. Every micro-action mattered. Every decision rippled across streets, puddles, and neon reflections. Humans had survived the storm, but the future demanded vigilance. Chaos was no longer a distant threat, it was woven into the city's pulse, testing ingenuity and adaptation at every turn. And faintly, from the edges of the city, a whisper traveled. We rebuild, but we remain watched. The shadows moved again. Deliberate, patient, and unrelenting, dusk fell over the city, painting streets in rust metal and cold blue hues. Neon flickered in puddles, fractured across broken glass, while faint hisses and sporadic sparks reminded everyone that the storm had not truly ended. The figure in black had returned, subtle yet deliberate, testing, probing, disrupting. Musk's prediction of collapse had happened, but this time, the challenge was immediate, palpable, and escalating. From a rooftop, he watched drones flicker back to life. Some functioning, some erratic. Sparks leapt from damaged devices like fireflies. Mechanical motifs whispering intent. The figure in black moved unseen below, orchestrating disruptions with surgical precision. Traffic lights failed, generators sputtered, and communication nodes blinked erratically. Humans had adapted before, but this new interference demanded vigilance, improvisation, and courage at every corner. Footsteps echoed across puddle-streaked streets. Civilians moved quickly but cautiously, guided by repaired systems and improvised barricades. Sparks hissed from exposed panels. Drones fell sporadically from above. The storm's calm was gone, chaos returned, subtle but precise. A predator testing prey. Every movement had to be deliberate, every choice weighted with survival. Musk's vision of collapse had collided with ingenuity, but now unpredictability had returned to dominate. He moved through the streets, eyes scanning shadows, reflections, and neon-streaked puddles. Mechanical hisses punctuated the quiet, faint motifs of the antagonist's presence. Improvisation became instinct, adaptation became survival, and every micro-decision rippled across the city. Sparks popped from malfunctioning systems, faint hums warned of potential disruption. Humans had learned to navigate chaos, but the game had changed. In the central plaza, teams coordinated micro-repairs, rerouted power lines, and restored communication. Yet every successful repair triggered a new subtle disruption elsewhere. A drone fell from a roof, a generator sputtered, neon flickered. The figure in black was orchestrating a dance of chaos and precision, forcing humans to improvise constantly, adapt instantly, and survive deliberately. Musk's predicted collapse was no longer just a historical event, it was a live battlefield of strategy and ingenuity. From a vantage point, he observed a young woman directing a small group through hazards. Sparks leapt from malfunctioning devices, puddles rippled with reflections of fractured neon, and every movement was deliberate. Improvisation dictated the rhythm of survival. Each decision carried weight, each micro-victory reshaped the city's pulse, and each failure threatened cascading chaos. The storm's lesson remained: vigilance, adaptability, and collaboration were the only path forward. Footsteps sounded behind him. He spun, but the shadow dissolved into the fractured neon reflections. The figure in black remained unseen, leaving only traces, mechanical motifs, sporadic hisses, and sparks dancing across puddles. Every disruption was precise, targeted, deliberate. Humans had survived systemic collapse before, but this resurgence of chaos tested improvisation, coordination, and instinct on a new level. Lightning flickered far above, painting streets in cold blue and rust metal tones. Drones twitched and fell, sparks leapt from broken panels, and communication nodes blinked erratically. Every movement in the city became a calculated dance. Civilians navigating hazards, teams rerouting power, and improvised barricades guiding pathways. The antagonist had returned, testing every adaptation, exploiting every weakness, and forcing survival into a new, urgent rhythm. He paused at a damaged intersection, watching a malfunctioning generator sputter and hiss. Sparks danced across wet asphalt. Neon fractured endlessly in puddles. Each restored system, each improvised barricade, each micro-decision rippled across the recovering city. Musk's prediction had arrived, but human ingenuity was now being challenged in real time, under pressure, with chaos active and unpredictable. From a rooftop vantage, he saw the figure in black manipulating a device, sparks flying across puddles below. Mechanical hisses punctuated every move. Drones fell intermittently, and nodes blinked in erratic sequences. Humans adapted instantly, improvising, rerouting power, guiding civilians. The city had survived systemic collapse before, but now the test was direct, personal, immediate. Every choice carried consequence. He exhaled sharply, scanning shadows, puddles, and flickering neon. Every restored circuit, every disabled drone, every improvised solution was a testament to resilience. But the figure in black was forcing improvisation to its limit. Chaos was no longer passive. It was active, deliberate, and strategic. Musk's vision of collapse had become a battlefield, and survival depended on constant attention, ingenuity, and collaboration. From the command hub, faint signals flickered in and out. Orders were issued with precision, coordination attempted despite intermittent failures. Sparks hissed across puddles, drones twitched, and nodes blinked unpredictably. Humans adapted instantly, improvising and reclaiming control. Yet every step was shadowed by the antagonist's subtle manipulations. Musk's prediction had been realized, but this resurgence was a test of endurance, creativity, and collective vigilance. He whispered softly, almost philosophically, "Chaos is not gone. It evolves. We endure by staying ahead." And somewhere, faint in the shadows, the city seemed to respond. We watch. We adapt. We persist. Even as dusk deepened into night, traces of disruption continued. Sparks popped from malfunctioning devices, drones fell intermittently, and faint mechanical motifs lingered in shadows. Humans moved with deliberate caution, improvising around failures, coordinating micro-repairs, and reclaiming control. Musk's vision of collapse had set the stage, but now, ingenuity and vigilance dictated who would survive the next wave of chaos. And faintly, from the edges of the city, a whisper traveled. The storm is past, but the challenge is returning. The city held its breath, knowing chaos had returned with intent. Night had fallen fully, neon bleeding across wet streets in fractured shards. Sparks hissed faintly from exposed circuits, mechanical motifs whispered in the shadows, and the city's pulse throbbed with tension. The figure in black had returned with purpose, no longer just a ghost of chaos, but an orchestrator, testing every human adaptation, probing every weakness. Musk's vision of collapse was no longer hypothetical, it was live, immediate, and lethal in its precision. He moved through alleys, slick with rain, eyes scanning every shadow, reflection, and glint of neon. Sparks leapt from malfunctioning panels, drones fell intermittently, and faint hisses echoed from abandoned devices. Improvisation had become instinct. But tonight, survival required more than instinct. It demanded strategy, anticipation, and courage in the face of deliberate disruption. In the central plaza, teams worked frantically to reroute power lines, restore communication nodes, and stabilize malfunctioning generators. Sparks popped from exposed circuits, puddles reflected fractured neon endlessly, and drones twitched erratically overhead. The figure in black was orchestrating chaos like a conductor, every disruption deliberate, precise, and escalating. Musk's predicted collapse had set the stage, but this confrontation was a test of ingenuity under pressure. Footsteps echoed from multiple directions. Shadows twisted and merged with puddles, reflections splitting infinitely. Civilians moved with purpose, guided by improvised barricades and carefully rerouted paths, yet every microstep risked triggering cascading failure. Sparks hissed across wet asphalt, mechanical motifs whispered in corners, and drones fell sporadically, reminders that chaos was active, relentless, and strategic. From a high vantage, he observed the antagonist manipulating systems. Sparks danced across puddles, generators sputtered, and communication nodes blinked erratically. The figure in black was precise, patient, and relentless, pushing humans to the edge of improvisation. Every failure risked domino effects. Every success required immediate adaptation. Musk's collapse had arrived, but human ingenuity was now being tested in real time against a calculating, unseen opponent. He paused at a cracked intersection. Sparks popped from broken panels. Puddles reflected fractured neon endlessly. Improvised barricades guided civilians safely, yet every movement was tense, calculated. Mechanical hisses echoed from the shadows. Improvisation, adaptation, and collaboration had been enough before, but now they were survival's only weapons against a deliberate, intelligent chaos. In the rooftops above, a young woman coordinated micro-repairs, guiding a small group past hazards. Sparks danced in puddles, neon fractured endlessly across wet streets, and drones fell intermittently from above. Every movement carried weight. Every decision rippled across the city. The storm's lessons were still relevant. Vigilance, adaptability, and collaboration defined survival. From the shadows, faint, mechanical hisses grew louder, precise, deliberate. The figure in black had emerged closer, yet remained unseen, testing the city's networks, exploiting weaknesses, and forcing improvisation to its absolute limit. Musk's vision of systemic collapse had arrived, but humans had learned to anticipate, counter, and survive. Yet this confrontation was not theoretical. It was immediate, palpable, and dangerous. He exhaled sharply, scanning puddles, reflections, and broken neon. Every restored system, every disabled drone, every improvised barricade was a micro-victory, but the figure in black was escalating. Chaos was no longer passive. It was deliberate, intelligent, and relentless. Survival depended on anticipation, ingenuity, and constant adaptation. Musk's prediction had collided with human resilience, producing a battleground where every choice carried consequence. From the command hub, signals flickered unpredictably. Orders were shouted, coordination attempted, but the antagonist's disruptions were precise. Sparks hissed across puddles, drones twitched, and communication nodes blinked erratically. Improvisation had become instinct, adaptation a necessity, and vigilance a continuous, unrelenting task. The storm had tested them before, but tonight, the city faced a strategic opponent, unseen but calculating. He whispered softly, almost as a mantra, "Chaos evolves. So must we." Shadows shifted in the corners, reflections fractured in puddles, and mechanical motifs hummed faintly from malfunctioning devices. Humans moved deliberately, improvising, coordinating, reclaiming territory one node at a time. The figure in black remained unseen, but present, a ghost testing limits, probing weaknesses, ensuring every adaptation carried weight. Lightning flickered far above, illuminating the city in brief bursts of cold blue and rust metal light. Sparks leapt from malfunctioning panels, drones fell intermittently. Civilians navigated streets with precise coordination, barricades guided safe passage, and every improvisation reshaped the city's pulse. Musk's collapse had come, but this confrontation demanded ingenuity pushed to its absolute edge, strategy woven with survival instinct, and courage in every choice. From a distant rooftop, faint movement caught his eye. The figure in black was orchestrating chaos deliberately, manipulating systems, testing responses, and exploiting every micro-failure. Sparks hissed in puddles, drones twitched and fell. Humans adapted, improvising solutions instantly, reclaiming control, but every move was a calculated risk. Musk's prediction had become a battleground, and survival depended on foresight, strategy, and relentless adaptation. He exhaled slowly, letting the weight of responsibility settle. Every micro-decision mattered. Every restored circuit, every improvised barricade, every coordinated action was a ripple of survival. Chaos had returned, deliberate and intelligent, but humans had learned to anticipate, counter, and endure. The city's pulse was jagged, improvisational, alive, and ready for what was coming next. And faintly, from the edges of the city, a whisper traveled. The storm is not over. We survive by staying ahead. Tonight, survival was no longer just adaptation, it was confrontation. The city held its breath. Neon fractured across puddles, sparks hissed from exposed circuits, and faint mechanical motifs whispered from shadows. Every street, every rooftop, every shattered panel was alive with tension. The figure in black had escalated its disruptions, orchestrating chaos like a conductor of destruction, testing every adaptation, every improvisation, every ounce of human ingenuity. Musk's predicted collapse had arrived, but tonight, survival demanded confrontation, decisiveness, and courage. He moved swiftly through slick streets, eyes scanning reflections, shadows, and flickering neon. Sparks leapt from malfunctioning panels, drones fell intermittently, and faint hisses echoed from abandoned devices. Improvisation had become instinct. Anticipation was now mandatory. Every decision could trigger cascading failure or secure a small, critical victory. In the central plaza, teams coordinated frantically. Barricades were reinforced, generators stabilized, and communication nodes rerouted. Sparks hissed across puddles, drones twitched erratically overhead, and neon fractured endlessly in the rain. The figure in black had returned, direct and deliberate, probing every weakness, forcing improvisation to its absolute limit. Musk's vision of systemic collapse had become an immediate battlefield, every choice a matter of life or death. Footsteps echoed from multiple directions, deliberate, precise. Shadows twisted across puddles, reflections splitting infinitely. Civilians moved with purpose, guided by improvised barricades and carefully rerouted pathways. Every microstep risked triggering a chain reaction, yet humans adapted instantly, improvising solutions, reclaiming control over failing systems. The antagonist's presence was everywhere, unseen yet palpable, mechanical motifs humming like a heartbeat of chaos. From a rooftop, he watched as the antagonist manipulated drones, sabotaged generators, and triggered intermittent system failures. Sparks danced across puddles, communication nodes blinked erratically, and mechanical hisses echoed from hidden corners. Every disruption was precise, strategic, and escalating. Survival now required not just adaptation, but active confrontation, anticipating moves, countering threats, and reclaiming control in real time. He paused at a cracked intersection, puddles reflecting neon shards in infinite patterns. Improvised barricades guided civilians, yet every step was tense, deliberate. Sparks leapt from exposed circuits, faint hisses echoed in the distance. Every micro-decision mattered. Musk's collapse had arrived, but human ingenuity was now being tested at the limits of strategy, improvisation, and courage. From a high vantage, he observed a young woman directing a small group through hazards. Sparks danced in puddles, drones fell intermittently, and reflections fractured endlessly. Every movement carried weight, every choice rippled across the city. Improvisation was instinct, collaboration a necessity, and vigilance an unyielding rhythm. Mechanical hisses grew louder, precise, deliberate. The figure in black was closer, orchestrating chaos with surgical intent. Drones tumbled from rooftops. Generators sputtered. Communication nodes blinked unpredictably. Humans adapted instantly, improvising countermeasures, rerouting power, and reclaiming critical zones. Survival demanded strategy, instinct, and courage. Chaos was no longer passive. It was a living, intelligent adversary. Lightning flashed across the city, illuminating rooftops and streets in cold blue and rust metal hues. Sparks popped from malfunctioning panels, puddles reflected fractured neon, and drones fell sporadically. Every improvisation mattered. Every micro-victory reshaped the city's pulse. Musk's predicted collapse had created the terrain. Human ingenuity now dictated the outcome. He exhaled, scanning shadows, puddles, and flickering neon. Every restored system, every disabled drone, every improvised barricade was a micro-victory, but the figure in black was relentless, calculating, and precise. Chaos had returned to test survival directly. Humans had adapted before, but now confrontation demanded ingenuity, anticipation, and courage beyond instinct. From the command hub, signals flickered erratically. Orders were shouted, teams coordinated micro-repairs with precision. Sparks hissed across puddles, drones twitched and fell, and nodes blinked unpredictably. Improvisation had become instinct, vigilance continuous. The storm had tested them before, but now humans faced a conscious, intelligent adversary. Survival required strategy, courage, and collective determination. He whispered softly, almost as a mantra, "Chaos is alive. So are we." Shadows shifted, neon fractured endlessly across puddles. Mechanical motifs hummed faintly from failing systems. Humans moved deliberately, improvising, coordinating, reclaiming territory. The figure in black remained unseen but omnipresent, a ghost testing limits, probing weaknesses, ensuring every adaptation carried consequence. From distant rooftops, movement caught his eye. The antagonist was manipulating systems, orchestrating disruptions, and testing responses. Sparks hissed in puddles. Drones fell intermittently. Humans adapted instantly, reclaiming control, countering chaos, but every move was a calculated risk. Musk's collapse had arrived, but survival now depended on ingenuity, courage, and collaboration at every turn. Finally, confrontation became unavoidable. In the central plaza, humans anticipated the antagonist's next disruption, rerouted power with precision, and coordinated micro-repairs with unwavering focus. Sparks popped from malfunctioning circuits, drones fell intermittently, and neon fractured endlessly. The city became a dynamic battlefield, chaos, testing, improvisation, adaptation, and ingenuity simultaneously. He took a deep breath, eyes scanning puddles, shadows, and neon shards. Every microaction mattered. Every restored system, every barricade, every strategic improvisation shaped survival. Chaos had returned, intelligent and deliberate, but humans had learned, adapted, and endured. Musk's prediction had come true, but ingenuity, collaboration, and courage defined the city's ultimate fate. And faintly, from the edges of the city, a whisper traveled, "We survive, we adapt, we endure, and we are ready for whatever comes next." The storm had passed, but its echoes lingered in every street and shadow. Dawn crept slowly over the city, painting puddles in hues of dusk gold and cold blue. The chaos had subsided, or at least receded, leaving behind fractured streets, scorched circuits, and faint hisses from systems still stabilizing. Humans moved cautiously, scanning shadows, repairing, recalibrating, and improvising with the rhythm of resilience hardwired into their every gesture. The figure in black was gone, or hidden, its influence lingering only in sporadic malfunctions and flickering neon. He walked along cracked asphalt, puddles reflecting fractured neon like veins of memory. Sparks hissed from exposed panels. Drones twitched weakly, and faint mechanical motifs whispered from abandoned corners. Survival had become instinct. Improvisation was second nature. Musk's prediction of systemic collapse had arrived, but humans had endured, adapting their ingenuity to a city scarred yet alive. In the central plaza, teams coordinated minor repairs, restored weak circuits, and guided civilians through safe corridors. Sparks popped softly across puddles. Generators hummed steadily, neon fractured but stabilized. Improvisation had become embedded, vigilance permanent. Every restored system was a micro-victory, a testament to resilience and adaptation. Footsteps echoed lightly on wet streets. Shadows stretched across puddles and broken glass. Civilians moved deliberately, scanning the environment, recalibrating routines, and internalizing lessons from chaos. The antagonist's presence was absent, but remembered traces remained in weak nodes, faint mechanical hisses, and subtle system anomalies. Survival had been won, but vigilance was eternal. From rooftops, he observed drones resuming patrols, weak but functional. Sparks hissed from malfunctioning panels. Neon reflected endlessly across puddles. Improvisation had shifted from reactive to proactive. Humans rebuilt, recalibrated, and reinforced not just for survival, but for mastery over a fragile, unpredictable environment. Musk's collapse had been the catalyst. Human ingenuity had become the constant. Mechanical motifs pulsed faintly in abandoned systems. Drones twitched intermittently. The figure in black had vanished, but its lessons lingered. Chaos could return, precision could strike unpredictably, and vigilance would never be optional. Humans had survived systemic collapse, navigated direct interference, and confronted intelligent disruption, but the city would always bear scars and whispers of threat. He paused at a cracked intersection, puddles reflecting neon shards infinitely. Sparks hissed faintly from a damaged generator. Improvised barricades had been dismantled or repurposed. Civilians moved freely yet cautiously, and the pulse of recovery echoed through the streets. Every micro-action mattered. Survival had been earned, but vigilance would remain instinctive. From a rooftop, a young woman guided a small group toward a restored hub. Sparks leapt from weak circuits. Puddles reflected fractured neon in infinite patterns. Every movement carried lessons learned: improvisation, adaptation, collaboration. The storm was over, but the rhythm of survival had become permanent. Musk's vision of collapse had arrived, but human resilience had redefined the aftermath. Lightning flickered far above, brief and silent, painting the city in rust metal and dusk-gold hues. Sparks popped from malfunctioning panels. Drones twitched weakly. Humans moved with deliberate calm, restoring systems, recalibrating, and improvising continuously. The city had survived systemic collapse and active disruption. Now, it adapted, enduring the lingering echoes of chaos. He exhaled, scanning shadows, puddles, and neon shards. Every restored circuit, every repaired node, every improvisation rippled through the recovering city. Chaos had tested them, but humans had endured. Musk's prediction had arrived, yet human ingenuity had transformed vulnerability into resilience, fragility into adaptability, and threat into mastery. From the edges of the city, faint movement suggested lingering uncertainty. Sparks hissed softly. Mechanical motifs pulsed faintly in hidden systems. Humans had survived the storm, the antagonist, and systemic collapse, but they remained alert. Vigilance, adaptation, and ingenuity would now define life in a world where chaos could return at any moment. He whispered softly, almost philosophically, "We endure. We adapt. We persist." Shadows shifted in puddles, reflections fractured endlessly, and the city exhaled a fragile, jagged pulse of survival. Musk's collapse had been a challenge. Human ingenuity had become the answer. The storm was past, but its echoes lingered, reminding every survivor that mastery over chaos was never final, only continuous, relentless, and alive. And faintly, from the neon-lit horizon, a whisper traveled: "We rebuild, we endure, and we remain vigilant, always." Even in calm, the city remembered the storm. Morning sunlight fractured through drifting clouds, scattering across puddles like shards of memory. The streets were quieter now, yet every crack, every flickering neon sign, every faint hum of mechanical remnants carried echoes of chaos past. Humans moved with careful deliberation, their instincts shaped by nights of disruption, improvisation, and survival. Musk's predicted collapse had arrived and the city had endured, but the lesson lingered. Resilience was not static, it had to be cultivated continuously. He walked past repaired circuits, puddles reflecting fractured light, and makeshift barricades now repurposed as communal seating. Sparks hissed faintly from weak generators. Drones hovered in cautious patrols. Every movement, every repair, every subtle recalibration was a reminder that chaos could return, and the city had to remain vigilant. Survival was no longer reactive, it had become anticipatory. In the central plaza, teams coordinated reconstruction. Power lines were rerouted, communication nodes stabilized, and community members guided one another through the fractured streets. Sparks popped softly across puddles. Neon reflected endlessly in distorted patterns. Humans had adapted their strategies, transforming improvisation into a structured, living system of vigilance. Musk's collapse had been the trigger, but human ingenuity was now permanent. Shadows stretched across streets, puddles mirrored fractured neon, and faint mechanical motifs whispered from abandoned corners. The figure in black was gone or hidden, but the city remembered. Every malfunction, every weak system, every subtle anomaly was a reminder that survival required perpetual adaptation. Civilians moved deliberately, coordinating micro-repairs instinctively, ensuring that lessons from chaos were embedded into every layer of urban life. From a rooftop, he observed the city slowly breathe. Drones resumed patrols, generators hummed steadily, and neon stabilized. Sparks hissed faintly from repaired panels. Improvisation had shifted from reactive to strategic, collaboration from urgent to organized. Humans had endured systemic collapse, confronted deliberate disruption, and emerged stronger, but vigilance had become the city's heartbeat. Lightning flickered far above, brief and silent, painting streets in cold blue and dusk gold. Sparks popped from repaired circuits. Mechanical motifs pulsed faintly in hidden systems. The figure in black might return, or might remain a memory, but the city's response had evolved. Humans moved with deliberate calm, restoring, rebuilding, and preparing for unknown future challenges. Musk's vision of collapse had arrived. Human resilience had created the future. He paused at a puddle reflecting fractured neon and sky. Every micro-action mattered. Repaired nodes, recalibrated circuits, stabilized drones. Every improvisation and lesson learned was a permanent ripple in the city's survival network. Chaos had been a teacher, adversity a sculptor. The city was scarred but alive, cautious but adaptive, vigilant but empowered. On the edges of the city, faint signs of movement suggested latent threats, but humans no longer merely survived. They anticipated, they adapted, they innovated. Every repaired panel, every rerouted power line, every coordinated action was a seed of mastery over uncertainty. Musk's collapse had been the crucible. Ingenuity, collaboration, and vigilance were now the legacy. He whispered softly, almost as a quiet vow, "We endure, we adapt, we anticipate." Shadows shifted in puddles, neon fractured endlessly, and the city exhaled a calm yet jagged pulse of life. The storm was past, but its lessons remained, etched into every street, every circuit, every human heart. And faintly, from the neon-lit horizon, a whisper traveled. The storm taught us survival. The city teaches us vigilance, and the future waits. Even in quiet, the city felt the tremors of what was coming next. Morning light spilled across puddles, reflecting fractured neon, and the remnants of a city rebuilt yet alert. Sparks hissed faintly from repaired circuits, drones hovered with careful, deliberate motion, and faint mechanical motifs whispered from corners long abandoned. The city had survived collapse, confrontation, and chaos, but survival was no longer enough. Preparation, anticipation, and foresight had become survival's new currency. He moved through streets that seemed calm but were layered with unseen tension. Cracks in asphalt carried puddles reflecting fractured neon, subtle shadows hiding weak nodes, and faint electrical hums hinted at systems that were still vulnerable. Every repaired panel, every recalibrated device, every restored communication node was a step toward long-term resilience, but each step also reminded the city that the storm was never truly gone. In the central plaza, teams worked with precision. Micro-repairs were coordinated like choreography. Circuits rerouted, generators stabilized, drones deployed strategically. Sparks hissed across puddles. Neon fractured endlessly. Humans had transformed improvisation into structured strategy, vigilance into instinct, and survival into proactive mastery. Musk's predicted collapse had been a catalyst. Now ingenuity and preparation defined the city's future. From rooftops, faint movement suggested anomalies, drones behaving strangely, faint flickers in neon, shadows that did not align. The figure in black might have left or might be testing new contingencies. Mechanical motifs pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat of chaos lying dormant, waiting for the right moment. Humans had endured before, but the city now realized that complacency could be deadly. He paused at a cracked intersection. Puddles reflected neon in the drifting clouds above. Sparks hissed faintly from weak circuits. Improvised barricades had been repurposed for community use. Civilians moved deliberately, scanning the environment, coordinating micro-actions with precision. Survival had evolved into anticipation, adaptation into systemic design. Musk's collapse was past, but the lessons were permanent. Vigilance and ingenuity were now inseparable. Lightning flickered in distant clouds, brief but precise, casting cold blue and rust metal hues across streets. Sparks leapt from repaired panels, drones twitched intermittently. From a rooftop vantage, he observed subtle irregularities in city systems, faint malfunctions, drones deviating slightly from patterns, neon flickering at inconsistent intervals. The antagonist might not be present physically, but chaos had left seeds that could germinate unpredictably. From the command hub, teams monitored all activity with heightened awareness. Signals flickered erratically, micro repairs were issued in real time, coordination flowed like a living organism. Humans had rebuilt systems, stabilized infrastructure, and transformed improvisation into proactive strategy. Yet beneath the calm, faint motifs suggested hidden threats, latent disruptions, and challenges that required constant attention. He exhaled slowly, scanning puddles, neon shards, and distant shadows. Every restored system, every repaired node, every coordinated microaction was a testament to human ingenuity, but also a warning. The city could never truly relax. Chaos was dormant, intelligent, and patient, waiting for opportunity. Musk's collapse had shown the fragility of systems. The city had learned to transform fragility into vigilance, and vulnerability into strategy. From distant rooftops, faint movement caught his eye. Shadows shifting, drones twitching, sparks flickering unpredictably. The antagonist's presence, or its legacy, was still felt, embedded in every weak node, every misaligned signal, every subtle anomaly. Humans had endured before, confronted chaos directly, and survived collapse, but anticipation had now become essential. Every repaired circuit, every stabilized generator, every coordinated action was a step toward long-term mastery. He whispered softly, almost as a mantra, "The city learns. We adapt, and we prepare." Shadows stretched across puddles. Neon reflected endlessly in fractured patterns. Mechanical motifs pulsed faintly from hidden systems. Humans had transformed survival into strategy, chaos into a teacher, and collapse into preparation. The city was scarred, alert, and ready, but the future remained uncertain. And faintly, from the neon-lit horizon, a whisper traveled. The storm may return differently. We endure, we adapt, and we watch for. The challenge is never truly gone. Even in rebuilding, the city felt the weight of unseen eyes. The streets were calm, but only superficially. Neon shimmered faintly across puddles, reflecting cracks in asphalt that bore witness to past chaos. Sparks hissed from circuits recently repaired, and drones patrolled deliberately, their mechanical motifs humming faintly in corners. The city had survived collapse and confrontation, but calm was only temporary. Something subtle had shifted, imperceptible yet deliberate, signaling that vigilance must remain unbroken. He moved through the streets with measured steps, eyes scanning reflections, shadows, and the slight flicker of neon in puddles. Microfailures in generators blinked intermittently. Communication nodes twitched. Every repair, every recalibration, every subtle adjustment carried the weight of survival learned through nights of chaos. Musk's collapse had taught the city to endure, but now adaptation required anticipation, not reaction. In the central plaza, teams coordinated quietly but efficiently. Drones hovered over repaired power grids, circuits were rerouted with precision, and micro-repairs flowed like choreography. Sparks hissed softly across puddles, neon fractured endlessly. Humans had transformed improvisation into instinctive strategy, survival into systemic vigilance. Yet, subtle anomalies suggested that the figure in black or its ideology might have left dormant contingencies, waiting to test them again. From rooftops, faint movement suggested irregularities. Shadows shifted unnaturally. Drones deviated subtly from patterns. Neon flickered in inconsistent sequences. The city's systems were functional but vulnerable, and humans knew it. Every repaired circuit, every stabilized generator, every coordinated microaction now carried dual purpose, maintaining functionality while watching for the unseen. Survival had evolved into perpetual awareness. He paused at a cracked intersection, puddles reflecting fractured neon like fractured memories. Sparks hissed faintly from repaired circuits. Improvised barricades were repurposed for public spaces. Civilians moved cautiously yet deliberately. Lessons from chaos were embedded in every gesture, Vigilance was instinct, adaptation, a reflex, and anticipation the new currency of survival. Musk's predicted collapse had been a wake-up call, but now the city had transformed fragility into foresight. Lightning flickered in distant clouds, cold blue and rust metal hues painting streets in stark contrast. Sparks leapt from weak circuits. Drones twitched intermittently. From a rooftop vantage, he observed subtle anomalies in the city's systems, micro-malfunctions, drones hesitating, neon flickering in patterns that hinted at unseen interference. The antagonist or its legacy had left traces. Humans had survived before, but now survival required more than response. It required foresight, anticipation, and constant vigilance. From the command hub, teams monitored all activity with heightened awareness. Signals flickered intermittently. Micro-repairs were issued in real time. Coordination flowed with precision. Humans had rebuilt, stabilized, and adapted, but latent threats remained. The city had learned from collapse, but the lessons of the figure in black were embedded in every weak node, every subtle misalignment, every hidden anomaly. He exhaled slowly, scanning puddles, shadows, and neon shards. Every restored circuit, every repaired generator, every coordinated action reinforced survival but also revealed the fragility of systems. Chaos had taught them endurance, collapse had taught adaptation, but hidden threats demanded a new level of ingenuity. Musk's vision of collapse had arrived, but mastery over uncertainty was now the ongoing mission. From distant rooftops, movement suggested anomalies. Drones flickering unexpectedly, shadows shifting inconsistently, faint sparks in abandoned circuits. The antagonist's presence, physical or ideological, was embedded, waiting for opportunity. Humans had endured systemic collapse, direct confrontation, and lingering chaos, but anticipation had now become essential. Every repair, every recalibration, every coordination was a hedge against future disruption. He whispered softly, almost as a quiet vow, "The city learns, we adapt, we anticipate, and we endure." Shadows stretched across puddles, neon fractured endlessly. Mechanical motifs pulsed faintly in hidden corners. Humans had transformed survival into systemic strategy, chaos into a teacher, and collapse into foresight. The city was scarred, alert, and ready, but the future remained uncertain, and latent threats lingered like quiet storms. And faintly, from the neon-lit horizon, a whisper traveled. The past tested us. The storm returns in shadows. We endure, we adapt, and we watch for the challenge never truly ends. The calm shattered before anyone knew it could. Rain fell lightly over the city, tapping puddles that reflected fractured neon like broken memories. Sparks hissed from circuits barely stabilized, drones twitched intermittently, and faint mechanical motifs pulsed from hidden corners. For weeks, humans had rebuilt, adapted, and endured, but tonight, something deliberate stirred. The city's pulse shifted, subtle, precise, and unnerving. Survival was no longer just instinct, it demanded confrontation once more. He moved through slick streets, eyes scanning shadows, puddles, and flickering neon. Subtle anomalies now had patterns, drones hesitated, lights blinked in sequences that felt deliberate, and weak generators sputtered unpredictably. Musk's predicted collapse had been a challenge. This was an orchestrated test, intelligent and patient. Humans had adapted to chaos, but now the storm returned in calculated form. In the central plaza, teams monitored every system with heightened vigilance. Communication nodes blinked irregularly, circuits hummed faintly with anomalies, drones deviated slightly from established routes. Sparks popped softly across puddles, neon fractured endlessly. Humans responded with micro-adjustments, rerouting power, coordinating repairs, and improvising strategy in real time. Yet every small victory was shadowed by the sense of an unseen adversary. From rooftops, movement caught his attention. A drone fell, not malfunctioning by chance, but redirected deliberately. Shadows stretched across puddles, unnaturally. Neon flickered in repeating sequences that suggested intelligence behind disruption. The antagonist or its legacy was no longer passive. Humans had survived collapse and chaos before, but this was a confrontation of foresight versus calculation. He paused at a cracked intersection, puddles reflecting neon shards like fractured glass. Sparks hissed faintly from weak circuits. Civilians moved cautiously, guided by barricades and system redundancies, yet every step carried tension. Lessons from past storms were clear, vigilance was permanent, improvisation was essential, and anticipation could no longer be optional. Musk's collapse had been a wake-up call, but tonight the test was live, deliberate, and escalating. Lightning flashed briefly, illuminating distant rooftops in cold blue and rust metal hues. Sparks popped from failing panels, drones twitched erratically. From a rooftop vantage, he tracked subtle anomalies, micro malfunctions, slight deviations in drone patrols, flickers of neon signaling hidden interference. Humans responded instantly, repairing, rerouting, and coordinating, but the city now faced an adversary whose moves were calculated, patient, and adaptive. From the command hub, teams issued rapid micro-repairs, adjusted drone pathways, and stabilized weak circuits. Signals flickered unpredictably, minor explosions of sparks hissed in abandoned panels. Humans had rebuilt and adapted, but the latent threat had evolved into active disruption. Every action, every adjustment, every coordination now carried dual purpose, maintaining function and countering deliberate interference. He exhaled slowly, scanning puddles, shadows, and neon shards. Every restored system, every recalibrated device, every improvisation rippled through the city, but the adversary was learning too. Chaos had taught endurance, collapse had taught adaptation. Now active confrontation demanded strategic ingenuity. Musk's collapse had created the landscape. Human foresight and adaptability would define who controlled it. From distant rooftops, faint movement suggested intelligence behind the disruptions. Drones falling strategically. Generators destabilized in sequence, neon flickering in deliberate patterns. The antagonist's presence, physical, ideological, or mechanized, was no longer dormant. Humans had endured collapse and passive chaos. Now they faced the first active strike of a new adversary. Every repair, every recalibration, every micro-action was a countermeasure against unseen intelligence. He whispered softly, almost as a quiet mantra. We adapt, we confront, we endure. Shadows stretched across puddles, neon fractured endlessly, mechanical motifs pulsed faintly in hidden corners. Humans had transformed survival into strategy, chaos into lessons, and collapse into foresight, but now confrontation demanded precision, courage, and collective ingenuity. And faintly, from the neon-lit horizon, a whisper traveled. The calm was a lie. The storm has returned. We endure, we adapt, and now, we fight.